The sky shattered as the chaos abyss tore open. Dark demonic energy flooded the realm, swallowing mountains and rivers. Su-Yi stood alone on the blood-soaked earth. His clothes were torn, but his eyes burned with an unyielding resolve against the descending apocalypse, facing the ultimate destruction. Everything began with a humble test. An orphan boy touched the spiritual compass, and suddenly 5 distinct colors erupted. Gold, wood, water, fire, and earth intertwined brilliantly. The rare 5-element spiritual root awakened, marking the birth of a legend who would eventually challenge the heavens themselves. To fight the darkness, he must master the ultimate power. By gathering the extreme forces of the 5 elements and merging them into one, he unlocks the supreme Chaos 5 Elements mantra. Every breakthrough brings him closer to wielding the mythical artifact capable of sealing the abyss. Countless demonic cultivators lurk in the shadows, plotting to resurrect their dark god. Bloody battles await in mysterious ruins and deadly swamps. Can the young cultivator overcome these deadly trials, merge the 5 elements perfectly, and save the immortal realm from eternal darkness and absolute despair? In the remote Kinjian town, Su-Yi lived a tough life as an orphan. When the immortal envoy arrived, all children gathered. Su-Yi nervously placed his trembling hand on the glowing compass. Instantly, a blinding light shot into the sky, illuminating the small, quiet village completely. 5 brilliant colors, gold, green, blue, red, and brown, swirled together above the compass. The envoy gasped in absolute shock, his eyes wide. A 5-element spiritual root. Though mixed, it is 1 in a million. The crowd erupted into loud whispers, staring at the boy in pure awe. Entering the Grand Kingyun sect, Su-Yi faced harsh reality. Placed in the outer sect, his complex spiritual root made cultivation painfully slow. Arrogant disciples constantly mocked his lack of progress. Yet he remained silent, practicing tirelessly before dawn and reading ancient texts under the cold moonlight. Deep within the dusty corners of the sect's library, Su-Yi discovered a forgotten, torn manuscript. Brushing off the thick dust, he read the fated title, 5 Elements Rotation Technique. Though incomplete, he treated it like a priceless treasure, studying its profound mysteries day and night relentlessly. During the sect's expedition into the Spirit Illusion Valley, thick fog obscured their vision. Suddenly, a massive spirit rhino beast charged from the mist. Emitting a heavy earth attribute glow, its thick hide effortlessly deflected the disciples' frantic magical attacks, sending several of them flying through the air. Su-Yi stepped forward calmly. Channeling his new technique, he cast a precise water spell to soften the beast's rigid defense. Immediately after, a blazing fire spell erupted from his palms, striking the creature's weak point. The powerful beast roared in immense pain and finally retreated into the shadows. Deep inside the valley, the group uncovered an ancient hidden cave. Intricate traps and deadly mechanisms lined the stone walls. Relying on his deep understanding of the 5 elements, Su-Yi skillfully deactivated the hidden dangers, leading the amazed disciples safely into the secret inner chamber. On a stone pedestal rested a glowing manual, the Chaos 5 Elements scripture, beside a pulsing 5 Elements spirit orb. Before they could celebrate, a sinister laugh echoed. A group of ruthless demonic cultivators blocked the exit, their dark weapons gleaming with deadly poisonous intent in the dim light. Hand over the treasures, and we might spare your pathetic lives. The lead demon sneered. Su-Yi tightly gripped the glowing orb, refusing to back down. The demons lunged forward, unleashing a storm of dark magic that quickly overwhelmed the exhausted and terrified Kingyun sect disciples. Driven into a corner, Su-Yi made a bold choice. He forcefully absorbed the 5 Elements spirit orb into his body. A terrifying surge of raw power exploded within his veins. He executed the scripture's first stance, creating a massive 5-colored barrier that shattered the incoming dark spells. Taking advantage of their shock, Su-Yi launched a fierce counterattack. His sharp sword movements blended perfectly with explosive elemental magic. Fire and water danced around his blade, striking down the demonic cultivators one by one until the surviving enemies fled in absolute terror and panic. Returning to the sect as a hero, Su-Yi entered deep seclusion. However, the humiliated demons formed a massive alliance. Dark clouds suddenly swallowed the Kingyun sect as an army of demonic cultivators descended from the sky, raining destructive spells upon the protective mountain barriers without mercy. Lightning flashed as Su-Yi soared into the sky. Unleashing the advanced techniques of his new scripture, he transformed his immense elemental power into 5 roaring dragons. The majestic dragons tore through the dark clouds, colliding violently with the enemy forces and shaking the entire mountain range. The enemy leader, a master of dark elemental arts, stepped forward. His dark magic clashed directly with Su-Yi's brilliant light, creating shockwaves that shattered the ground below. "You cannot stop us," the leader roared, pushing his dark energy to the absolute limit to crush the young hero. Refusing to yield, Su-Yi analyzed the enemy's attack patterns. Finding a tiny flaw, he unleashed his ultimate technique. A blinding five-colored beam pierced through the oppressive darkness, striking the leader's chest directly. The Dark Master coughed up black blood and was sent flying across the battlefield. With their leader heavily wounded, the demonic army lost all morale. Su-yi led the sect's disciples in a massive, overwhelming charge, driving the evil forces completely out of their territory. Cheers erupted across the mountain, cementing Su-yi's status as the undisputed savior of the sect. Seeking higher realms, Su-yi left his home and traveled to the mysterious spirit realm. There he met loyal friends and uncovered a terrifying secret. The Chaos Abyss was slowly opening, threatening to release the ancient chaos demon god and plunge the entire world into eternal darkness. To prevent the apocalypse, Su-yi searched desperately for the mythical artifact. After countless deadly trials, he finally located the Chaos 5 Elements seal. However, activating it required the extreme power of all 5 elements, forcing him to seek out the strongest cultivators across the vast realm. The fateful day arrived as the Chaos Abyss tore open, releasing suffocating demonic energy. Su-yi and his powerful allies stood before the terrifying void. Pouring every ounce of their ultimate elemental energy into the ancient seal, they ignited a blinding light that illuminated the dark universe. With a deafening explosion, the magical seal expanded forcefully, closing the demonic rift. The world was saved, but the immense energy drain caused Su-yi to collapse into a deep coma. When he finally awoke, he found himself back in his old room at the Kingyun sect. Though hailed as a legendary hero, Su-yi knew the danger was far from over. After recovering his strength, he bid farewell to his masters and returned to the spirit realm. He immediately sensed a suffocating, unnatural tension lingering in the air, hinting at a new hidden crisis. Rumors spoke of bizarre energy fluctuations in forbidden zones. Su-yi ventured into the notorious Mist Swamp, a place shrouded in eternal fog and deadly silence. Suddenly, a gigantic swamp demon crocodile burst from the foul mud, its massive blood-stained jaws snapping fiercely toward his head. Dodging effortlessly, Su-yi unleashed his elemental sword arts. Gold, wood, water, fire, and earth energies merged into sharp, glowing blades. The crocodile's tough armor resisted at first, but the relentless, powerful strikes eventually sliced through its thick scales, dyeing the murky swamp water deep, dark red. Defeating the beast, Su-yi discovered an ancient ruin hidden deep within the swamp. The heavy stone doors were sealed with complex, glowing runes. Recognizing their elemental nature, he carefully channeled his spiritual energy, matching the ancient patterns until the massive doors slowly groaned and pushed open. Inside, the air was stale and heavy. Deadly traps awaited at every corner. Suddenly, razor-sharp stone spikes erupted from the ground. Su-yi leaped into the air, gracefully dodging the lethal attack. He quickly realized the mechanisms reacted directly to the intruder's specific elemental energy signature. Using earth magic to crush the spikes and water magic to extinguish hidden fire traps, he navigated the perilous corridor perfectly. At the deepest chamber, a glowing, ancient book rested on a large stone altar. It was the legendary technique that perfectly fused all 5 elements together. Before he could read the prize, heavy footsteps echoed behind him. A group of black-clad assassins entered, their eyes locked greedily on the glowing manual. "Hand over the book, and we might let you live," the leader barked, drawing a dark, cursed blade from his waist. "Take it if you can." Su-yi sneered coldly. He instantly engaged the assassins, his sword dancing with 5-colored light. The enemies coordinated flawlessly, launching vicious dark spells. Su-yi formed a perfect elemental shield, blocking their combined attacks, while analyzing their familiar sinister fighting style carefully. Realizing these men were remnants of the defeated demonic cult, Su-yi intensified his attacks. The assassins began to lose ground. Desperate, the leader crushed a pitch-black pearl in his hand. Instantly, a terrifying wave of pure dark energy exploded, completely engulfing Su-yi in suffocating shadows. Evil energy aggressively invaded Su-yi's veins, threatening to destroy his cultivation. "This is our secret weapon designed to kill righteous cultivators." The leader laughed maniacally. Gritting his teeth, Su-yi simultaneously activated both of his supreme scriptures, violently forcing the dark poison out of his system. His power surged to unprecedented levels. With a furious roar, Su-yi swung his sword, unleashing a devastating 5-colored energy wave. The blinding attack tore through the darkness, instantly reducing the terrified assassins to mere ashes. He searched their remains, finding clues pointing to a larger conspiracy. Following the clues, Su-yi reached a desolate, hidden valley. The trees were twisted and entirely black, radiating a chilling aura. Without warning, dozens of vicious, demonic cultivators swarmed from the shadows, completely surrounding him. Their bloodthirsty eyes gleamed with pure hatred and intense killing intent. The towering demon leader pointed his massive black sword at Su-yi. "You walked right into your grave today," he roared. Su-yi remained perfectly calm, slowly drawing his glowing blade. "It will take more than you cowards to take my life," he replied with absolute confidence. The battle erupted instantly. Dark spells rained down, but Su-Yi's sword moved like lightning. Every strike carried the heavy weight of the 5 elements, easily shattering the dark magic. However, these demons possessed unnatural strength enhanced by a mysterious evil force lingering within the dark valley. Changing tactics, Su-Yi used his elemental movement technique to vanish completely. The confused demons searched frantically. Suddenly appearing behind them, Su-Yi unleashed a massive crescent wave of energy, cutting down several enemies instantly. Furious, the demon leader activated a forbidden spell, his muscles bulging violently. Facing the terrifying pressure, Su-Yi merged his 5 elements into a massive spinning energy vortex. He thrust it forward, colliding directly with the leader's forbidden dark magic. The explosive impact shook the entire valley, sending the surrounding demons flying and heavily injuring the giant enemy leader. Seizing the perfect moment, Su-Yi poured all his remaining energy into his blade. He leaped high into the air, bringing the sword down with unstoppable force. A brilliant rainbow flash split the sky, cleanly slicing the giant demon leader in half and ending the fierce battle. Exploring the deepest part of the valley, Su-Yi discovered a sinister altar covered in pulsating bloody runes. The dark energy felt exactly like the chaos abyss. He realized the demons were attempting to break the ancient seal and summon the dark god back into the world. Knowing he had to destroy it immediately, Su-Yi launched a powerful attack at the altar. To his shock, the bloody runes completely absorbed his energy, leaving the stone structure entirely unharmed. The dark magic protecting the evil monument was far stronger than he had initially anticipated. Refusing to give up, Su-Yi remembered his newly acquired fusion technique. He pushed his spiritual power to its absolute limit, perfectly harmonizing the 5 elements into a single pure force. He struck the altar again, this time causing the ancient bloody runes to violently tremble and crack. The pure elemental energy resonated slowly, dissolving the evil magic. With a final deafening crack, the massive stone altar collapsed into a pile of useless rubble. The suffocating dark aura vanished from the valley, successfully stopping the demons' terrifying plot to destroy the entire peaceful, immortal realm. Su-Yi left the valley and quickly informed the major sects about the demons' secret plans. The immortal realm immediately heightened its defenses, ushering in a brief period of peace. Standing on a high mountain peak, Su-Yi gazed at the horizon, his heart full of determination. He knew the path of cultivation never truly ended. There would always be stronger enemies and deeper mysteries waiting in the vast universe. Gripping his sword tightly, Su-Yi stepped forward into the unknown, ready to face whatever challenges the endless heavens might throw at him next. As he journeyed further, the spiritual energy in the air grew incredibly dense. Ancient beasts roared in the distant misty mountains. Su-Yi's 5-element aura pulsed in perfect rhythm with the world around him. His legend was only just beginning in this vast, boundless world of immortals. In a bustling celestial city, cultivators traded rare artifacts and powerful pills. Su-Yi walked through the crowded streets, his calm demeanor hiding his terrifying strength. He sought ancient maps that could lead him to the mythical origins of the 5 elements, hoping to achieve ultimate enlightenment. A mysterious old vendor offered him a crumbling jade slip. "This contains the coordinates to the primal element realm," the old man whispered, his eyes gleaming. Su-Yi traded his valuable beast cores for the item, feeling a strange, powerful resonance the moment his fingers touched the jade. Following the jade's guidance, he arrived at a massive, swirling spatial tier above a boiling ocean. Lightning violently struck the dark waters as chaotic winds howled. Taking a deep breath, Su-Yi surrounded himself with his 5-colored energy shield and boldly dove straight into the dangerous portal. Inside the rift, gravity constantly shifted. Floating islands of pure crystal drifted through a sky made of liquid fire. Su-Yi landed gracefully on a floating rock, instantly feeling the immense pressure of the raw, untamed elemental energy pressing heavily against his powerful, perfectly cultivated physical body. A massive bird made entirely of blue lightning swooped down, its sharp talons aiming for his chest. Su-Yi didn't even draw his sword. He simply raised 2 fingers, firing a condensed beam of earth and metal energy that pierced the creature's wing, sending it crashing down. Deep within the floating islands, he found a glowing tree bearing 5 differently colored fruits. The legendary 5 elements sacred tree stood before him. As he approached the guardian of the tree, a majestic golden dragon slowly opened its ancient eyes, staring intensely at the young human. "Only one with a perfect foundation may claim the fruit," the dragon's voice echoed in his mind. Su-Yi unleashed his full aura, the 5 elements forming a perfect, harmonious circle behind him. The dragon nodded in silent approval, allowing him to pluck the precious, glowing sacred fruits. Consuming the fruits, Su-Yi's body became entirely translucent. The boundaries of his cultivation shattered completely as he stepped into the legendary divine realm. With the power to create and destroy worlds at his fingertips, he looked up at the stars, ready to conquer the highest heavens. A brief interlude of peace did not slow Su-Yi. In the sanctum of Lingjia, he devoted himself to the practice of Wu Xing Gui Ju, his mastery of the 5 elemental forces metal, wood, water, fire, and earth growing ever more precise and harmonious. Ambition and apprehension drew countless potentates to the Lingyu's threshold. When Sui arrived, he found the entrance swarming with formidable celebrated cultivators, tension hanging heavy in the air like foreboding mist. He did not rush forward. Instead, he scrutinized the undercurrents between rival powers, aware that a single misstep might ignite bloodshed. At the fringe of the crowd stood a lone woman in a white robe, her bearing ethereal and eyes cool as winter light. Sui approached and learned her name was Lu Rulai, scion of a reclusive, immortal family of Lingjia, who had likewise come seeking the Lingyu's secrets. Their conversation kindled an immediate kinship, and they resolved to explore the domain together. When the Lingyu's gate finally groaned open, its interior exhaled an air thick with palpable spiritual energy. Sui and Lu Rulai advanced cautiously amid strange spirit flora and beasts. They discovered several precious relics, yet none of the supreme opportunities they both sought. Their combined skill gradually overwhelmed the guardian. As the beast fell, other cultivators offered them grateful looks, but Sui felt in his marrow that the peril within the Lingyu was far from exhausted. Deeper within, they found an ancient palace whose sealed doors exuded a formidable archaic aura. Inside the palace, a great jade dais bore a tome emitting prismatic radiance alongside a crystalline lingzu whose purity resonated strongly with Sui's own essence. The tome's title read Hundun, Yuxing Zongji Midian, the supreme compendium he had long yearned for. No sooner had they reached for these treasures than word of their discovery spread through the Lingyu, and a host of covetous cultivators surged toward the palace. A brazen leader of the intruders demanded surrender. Sui refused and fought with Lu Rulai at his flank, although outnumbered their coordination repelled several waves. Yet as reinforcements swelled against them, Sui felt the Lingzu hum with latent power. He integrated that energy into his own and unleashed an elementary technique from Hundun Yuxing, Zongji Midian, the 5 elements entwining to form a forceful barrage that routed many attackers. The clash between Sui and Enyi Mojun convulsed the palace as elemental light and black magic collided. Lu Rulai strove to aid him, but found Enyi Mojun's corrupt power oppressive and impenetrable. Sui discerned a turbulence within the darkness and enacted Yuxing Lun's Wenju to counteract it, turning the 5 elements' mutual generation and restraint into a stratagem that unsettled his foe. As their duel escalated, spatial rifts split the surroundings, and both adversaries poured forth their utmost might. Enyi Mojun resorted to forbidden arts, a tide of shadow battering Sui's defenses. Exhaustion crept in, Sui's reserves dwindled, and the outcome teetered on the brink. In that crucible, Sui attained an instantaneous revelation of Hundun Yuxing Zongji Midian's ultimate principle. He combined the 5 elements into a single titanic vortex of spiritual energy and hurled it upon Enyi Mojun. The vortex collided with the dark tide with a thunderous detonation. Light and shadow neutralized one another. Enyi Mojun was cast away, grievously wounded, and vanished as a wisp of black smoke after vowing bitter defiance. Sui collapsed from the expenditure of his qi. Lu Rulai hastened to his side and helped him up. They had preserved the tome and the Lingzu. Returning to Lingjia, Sui entered seclusion under Lu Ruli's care to cultivate Hundun Yuxing Zongji Midian. He understood that his path remained long and fraught with trials, yet fortified by newfound insight and resolve, he was prepared to continue ascending the path of cultivation. The two embarked on a campaign of persuasion among the leading cultivation sects of Lingjia. They traversed grand halls and secluded monasteries, confronting prejudice and old grievances between sects. Through patient diplomacy and demonstration of the threat scale, they coaxed rival factions into a wary accord. Under their stewardship, a joint Xiaxian army was assembled, a fragile but powerful coalition forged in the face of annihilation. Sui accepted the vanguard command. With scouts and scouts, he hunted for the demonic cultivator's lair. Intelligence led them to a secluded valley where Enyi Mojun had entrenched his forces. The alliance advanced under cover of night, intending to strike a decisive blow and unmake the Moxiu threat before it metastasized further. Amid the chaos, Sui moved like a calm tempest, his long sword a silver argument against the dark. His blade carried the refined precision of his recent training, each stroke sent waves of light that unmade corrupt shadows. At the valley's center, Enyi Mojun confronted him openly and cast forth blades of pitch-black magic. Sui countered, channeling his newly tempered Yuxing energy and invoking techniques from the Hundun Yuxing Zongji Midian. The two engaged in a ferocious exchange that bent the very fabric of space around them. Lu Rulai fought at Sui's flank, weaving her clan's esoteric spells to hamper Enyi Mojun's movements and protect the allied ranks. Their coordination turned the tide of isolated skirmishes, but the demonic cultivators' numbers were vast, and the alliance began to strain under relentless pressure. Victory was not yet assured. The field trembled with the desperate measures of both sides. In the crucial moment, Su-yi devised a bold stratagem. He poured the essence of Yuxing into the earth itself, coaxing a controlled seismic upheaval that fractured the Moxiu formations and scattered their lines. Seizing the disarray, Su-yi unleashed an advanced maneuver from the Hundun Yuxing Zongji Midian. Yuxing energies coalesced into an immense celestial dragon of shimmering elements that roared across the valley, sweeping aside foes with irresistible force. Where the dragon passed, demonic cultivators were flung back, battered and broken. Enyi Mojun realized that defeat loomed, and in a final furious gambit, he chose mutual ruin over surrender. He unleashed the remnants of his dominion, a cataclysmic surge of black energy aimed to annihilate both enemy and self. Su-yi responded with a radiant shield, absorbing the cataclysmic impact with a thunderous clash that rattled the battlefield. Though Su-yi held, the shock battered him. When the dust settled, Lingzhe breathed again. Su-yi and Lu Rulai were venerated as its saviors. The Xiaxian Minpai paid homage, and gratitude flowed like a tide. Yet Su-yi's spirit was not consoled by laurels. He recognized the road of cultivation as a horizonless path, and understood that this victory, though decisive, would not be the last test of his resolve. Peace proved ephemeral. While Su-yi resumed his training, he was interrupted by an uncanny summons, a beckoning of unfamiliar caliber. Compelled by that resonance, he journeyed to a remote veiled precinct of Lingzhe where mists hung like curtains, and the ambient spirit energy was dense and ancient. There he found an ancient grotto, its portal sealed against the ages. Su-yi, drawing upon his cultivated reserve, forced the gate ajar and entered. Su-yi disclosed his discovery to Lu Rulai and the elders of the leading sects. Alarm spread through their councils like wildfire. A venerable elder pronounced that preparations must begin at once for an impending cosmic crisis. Su-yi resolved to voyage toward the universe's remote reaches in search of answers and countermeasures. Lu Rulai pledged unwavering companionship, and the pair, blessed by their allies, embarked upon a voyage beyond Lingzhe in a starcraft wrought by the realm's master artificers. Su-yi and Lu Rulai crept into the territory dominated by the dark forces, every inch of space seeming corrupted by a miasma of decay and oppression. Utilizing their ship's cloaking apparatus, they concealed themselves among a cluster of colossal black asteroids, vigilantly observing the enemy's movements as if the void itself were a treacherous witness. Su-yi attempted to sense the fortress interior with his spirit power, only to have the probing force struck back by a powerful surge of darkness. Lu Rulai frowned with urgency. This darkness is stronger than we anticipated. We must proceed with extreme caution. Su-yi acknowledged the gravity of their task, his determination hardening rather than waning. To glean deeper intelligence, Su-yi risked approaching the fortress. He invoked the Yuxing Dunshu, transforming into a streak of prismatic light and slipping closer under the guise of brilliance. The perimeter, however, teemed with insidious traps and formidable ceiling arrays. One misstep would condemn them to irrevocable ruin. Drawing upon consummate control of the five elements, Su-yi threaded through snares and wards with a craftsman's precision. At the fortress edge, he peered through a narrow fissure and beheld a conclave of black-robed figures gathered around a monumental obsidian altar. They chanted in unison, while a crystalline heart radiating abyssal energy rested upon the altar. This crystal was the wellspring of the dark force's potency. As Su-yi prepared to examine the ritual more closely, a shadow lunged at him. He drew his long sword and met the attack with Yuxing sword techniques, only to realize the intruders had already detected the infiltration. Shadow assassins, the enemy's elite, descended with uncanny speed and spectral blades that shimmered with an icy luminescence. Su-yi summoned the protections of the Hundun Yuxing Zongji Midian, letting the five elements coalesce into a defensive aegis that repelled the initial onslaught. Lu Rulai from their concealed craft perceived Su-yi's peril and piloted the ship to provide support. She unleashed her clan's luminous spells, beams of radiance meant to disrupt the assassin's maneuvers. Despite their combined efforts, the shadow assassin vanished and reappeared behind Su-yi, slashing his forearm. Blood flashed briefly, and Su-yi's gaze hardened as he resolved to no longer hold back. Calling forth the quintessence of his inner power, Su-yi unleashed a supreme technique from the Hundun cannon. A multi-hued bladey energy bearing apocalyptic force manifested and struck the assassin, who had insufficient time to evade and dissolved into ashes. Realizing their covert operation had been compromised, Su-yi and Lu Rulai retreated to their ship and made for the fringes of the dark domain. Their escape was met by a swarm of dark warships that encircled them, unleashing volleys of shadow beams. Maneuvering with desperate agility, the duo evaded salvo after salvo. When Lu Rulai despaired at the seemingly unbreakable ring, Su-yi scanned the enemy formation until he detected a subtle flaw in the perimeter. Seizing the opportunity, he guided the craft through the breach. A colossal black flagship loomed to bar their path, equipped with a devastating dark energy cannon. Su-yi infused the ship's engines with his Wuxing spirit energy, propelling their craft with a sudden, overwhelming surge of speed. As the flagship fired, he braided elemental force into a protective shield around them and piloted with uncanny finesse, darting past the flagship's flank. They burst from the encirclement and fled toward Ling Jie, hearts pounding with the knowledge that they had been sighted. In the grotto's dim sanctum, he unearthed an ancient manuscript chronicling 5 primordial Wuxing artifacts. In antiquity, 5 transcendent cultivators masters of Jin Mu Shuihua and 2 had forged corresponding relics that embodied immeasurable potency. If reunited, the quintet could unleash cataclysmic power sufficient to repel the shadowed tide. Stirred by the revelation, Su-yi resolved to locate these relics and spoke of his plan to Lu Rulai and the sects who pledged their aid. In time, and through relentless perseverance, the remaining artifacts were retrieved: Mu Ling Shenmu, Shui Ling Beoping, Hor Ling Xinjian, and Tu Ling Shenayan. Su-yi assembled the 5 relics, and invoking the Hundun, Wuxing Zongji Midian, endeavored to harmonize their energies. As the quintuple elemental forces converged, the artifacts responded in kind, their luminance intensifying until they resolved into a singular fused instrument of overwhelming power. Yet the dark forces, mindful of Ling Jie's preparations, struck first. An armada of shadow warships swept like a storm toward the spiritual realm, intent on extinguishing the nascent hope before it could mature. Su-yi, now bearing the amalgamated Wuxing relic, stood at the forefront of Ling Jie's defenders. With the assembled sects arrayed behind him, he pledged with unwavering conviction to safeguard their world. From the flagship's dais, the enemy commander sneered at the assembled resistance, deriding the notion that mere artifacts could thwart his dominion, and then commanded an onslaught. Dark beams rained upon the spiritual realm, but Su-yi raised the fused relic and molded its quintessence into a vast bulwark that repelled the assault. With a cry that carried the resolve of Ling Jie, he led the countercharge as the decisive battle for the fate of the spiritual realm commenced. The battle erupted like a storm. Torrents of black light descended from the void as the forces of darkness assailed Lingjia. Under Su-yi's command, the defenders answered in unison. Su-yi brandished the Wuxing Shinkai, and each sweep of the relic sent convulsive ripples of elemental power, scattering vast swaths of the malignant beams. Beside him, Lu Rulai invoked her family's exquisite incantations, striking at the vital conduits of the enemy warship with deft and precise sorcery. The Xiaxian Minpai would not be outdone. Disciples formed sword arrays and arcane formations, their coordination seamless. Sword adepts launched a cascade of keen-cutting strikes that carved through shadow, while spellcasters unleashed a cacophony of elemental assault-size spikes, fire globes, and crackling lightning colliding with the enemy's dark malice. The heavens above Lingjia shimmered with cascading light as explosions roared, deafening and brilliant. Perceiving that a frontal breakthrough would prove costly, the Dark Commander dispatched a covert cadre of shadow assassins to circumvent the main fray and sabotage the rear defenses. Su-yi, attuned to the currents of Wuxing, discerned the subterfuge and detached a contingent to intercept. Guided by his elemental perception, Lingjia's masters moved with surgical precision, closing the gaps through which the assassins sought to slip. In the rear, a desperate, breathtaking contest unfolded. The shadow assassins wove through defensive seams with uncanny footwork and obscuring arts, yet Lingjia's trackers and restraining spells gradually corralled them. An adept of earth sorcery anchored a malignant shadow to the very soil, his binding absorbing the assassin's evasion until allies converged and delivered the fatal strokes that extinguished the infiltration at its root. The 5 dragons surged, their roars eclipsing the cacophony of war. Jinlong gleamed like tempered metal scales, unyielding Malong coaxed rampant growth that entangled and constrained, Shuilong belched torrents that doused the black flames, Huolong burned with purifying conflagration, Tulong pressed with the solemn weight of the earth. Together they tore into the commander's shadowy phantoms, whose ferocity slowly yielded beneath the composite might of the Wuxing avatars. Seizing the moment, Su-yi unleashed a prismatic lance of light from the Wuxing Shinkai, an onslaught of annihilating force. The Dark Commander hurriedly erected a shadow shield, but the relic's radiance shattered it in an instant. Struck by the beam, the commander coughed blood, driven back and grievously wounded. His injury sent tremors through the enemy ranks, sowing doubt where there had been only ruthless discipline. Emboldened, the defenders surged in a full-scale counteroffensive. Su-yi led Lingjia's elite toward the enemy flagship, where layered defenses guarded its core. Employing Wuxing escapade and tactical acrobatics, he breached the bulwarks and entered the cramped heart of the vessel. In that constricted theater, the Wuxing Shinkai became a tempest. Every strike repelled clusters of foes. Lu Rulai pressed close, invoking her clan's ultimate rites to purge the lingering black taint within the flagship's hull. Their coordinated onslaught reached the commander's chamber. Though mortally weakened, he attempted one last gambit to drag them into shared ruin. Anticipating the intent, Su Yi wove Yuxing bonds that shackled the fallen lord in unbreakable restraint. He writhed impotent against the elemental fetters, and under the unwavering watch of Su Yi and Lu Ruolai his life force dwindled until it faded. With their leader struck down, the dark host collapsed into confusion, many surrendered, others fled into the void. Victory settled over Lingjia like a cleansing dawn. The people hailed Su Yi and Lu Ruolai as saviors. The Xiaxian Minpai held a lavish celebration to honor their triumph. The Yuxing Shinkai was entrusted to a veiled sanctum within Lingjia, guarded collectively by the sects, for Su Yi understood that peace demanded vigilance. In the months that followed, he and Lu Ruolai devoted themselves to instructing the next generation, imparting hard-earned techniques and battlecraft so that the mantle of guardianship might endure. Time tended Lingjia back to prosperity, yet Su Yi did not relinquish his discipline. One day, while in meditation, he perceived a subtle, mysterious fluctuation at the boundary of Lingjia. Following the thread of that energy, he discovered an arcane transfer array pulsing with alien light. Convinced it led to an uncharted realm, he resolved to explore it. With Lu Ruolai and the blessing of their people, they stepped into the array. When the luminance subsided, they stood upon a strange world of floating isles and uncanny flora, a realm ripe with wonder and peril. Side by side, they prepared to continue their shared odyssey, guardians, still explorers anew. Su Yi and Lu Ruolai descended from the teleportation array with cautious steps, their eyes sweeping the surroundings with vigilant curiosity. The air was suffused with an unfamiliar perfume, intoxicating yet charged with an inscrutable potency. Vast floating isles cast mottled shadows over the land, and occasional cries of strange beasts echoed from their heights. They followed a winding stone path edged by vines that shimmered with a faint inner light. The tendrils seemed sentient as the two approached. The vines stirred and coiled. Lu Ruolai leaned forward in fascination and nearly became ensnared before Su Yi, invoking a gentle wood affinity pulse, communed with the vegetation. The vines, sensing benevolence, slowly withdrew. Their path opened onto the lip of a colossal valley veiled in prismatic mist. Su Yi reached within himself to probe the fog, but the spiritual fluctuations there were bewilderingly complex. As they hesitated, a soft blue spirit bird materialized from the haze and circled them with deliberate motion, as if beckoning them onward. Heeding the bird's guidance, they stepped into the mist and found themselves in a secluded basin home to a vast lake whose waters shimmered violet as if dreamed. At the lake's center rose a small island upon which an ancient edifice stood, exuding a quiet, enigmatic aura. Compelled by curiosity, they swam across and climbed ashore. The great doors of the structure were shut, their surfaces scissed with esoteric sigils and arcane patterns. Su Yi studied the glyphs and discerned subtle correspondences to the elemental schema. With measured reverence, he activated the Hundun Yuxing Zongji Midian, channeling Yuxing energies into the carvings. The sigils began to glow, the portal side open with the release of an old, potent presence. The creature's third eyes discharged penetrating beams of energy. Su Yi drew his long blade and employed Yuxing sword techniques to parry, while Lu Ruolai countered with her clan spells, standing shoulder to shoulder with him. Observing their foe, Su Yi discerned a pattern to the attacks, and in the crucible of combat identified the third eye as the locus of vulnerability. A concentrated prismatic slash felled one, its shriek resounding through the hall. The battle intensified as the others pressed with renewed ferocity. Exhaustion crept into their limbs, yet retreat was never considered. In a decisive gambit, Su Yi gathered surrounding spiritual currents and whirled them into a titanic vortex of power, hurling it at the assailants. The creatures were drawn into the spiral, their strength ebbed, and they scattered, finally abandoning the field. When silence returned, the two resumed their scrutiny of the energy core. Su Yi perceived a synchronous affinity between the core and the Yuxing forces. If harmonized, it could augment his essence substantially. He once more invoked the Hundun Yuxing Zongji Midian and carefully poured his elemental spirit into the nucleus. The core responded with luminous cadence, and a profound resonance surged through Su Yi's meridians. As the infusion proceeded, his consciousness traversed a strange inner expanse where the primal nature of Yuxing revealed itself in crystalline clarity. Insight reshaped his comprehension. When he opened his eyes, a steadier, more formidable aura enveloped him. Lu Ruolai regarded him with radiant astonishment and declared that he had transcended a threshold. Su Yi, feeling the emboldened current within, knew their prospects in this realm had been irrevocably altered. Su Yi imparted into his companions the lessons of Lingjia combat and his personal cultivation insights, tailoring training to the peculiarities of this world's spiritual terrain. He adapted the teachings of the Hundun Yuxing Zongji Midian into a pragmatic system better attuned to local conditions, thereby strengthening the cohort's efficacy. As their mastery deepened, the party followed the scent of shadow to its source and arrived before a fortress shrouded in oppressive gloom. As Su-yi and his companions approached the Heian Shinbeo, its gates yawned open and disgorged a swarm of grotesque shadow beings. They exuded a rancid miasma, their forms as if congealed from living darkness, endlessly writhing and reshaping themselves into intolerable silhouettes. Lu Ruolai matched his vigor with equal resolve, unleashing her family's most incisive spells. Bolts of radiant energy streaked across the battleground like lightning, while the rest of the company displayed their varied prowess, some charging into close quarters with gleaming weapons, others raining elementally charged projectiles from a distance. Light and spellcraft intertwined, cries of battle reverberating like thunder. Yet the legions of darkness were inexhaustible, crashing against them in unrelenting waves. As the struggle wore on, several allies faltered beneath exhaustion and injury. Anxiety pricked at Su-yi. He knew that attrition alone would not suffice, and that the source of corruption must be found and extinguished without delay. Surveying the castle's architecture amid the fray, Su-yi discerned a towering keep at its heart that radiated the most concentrated malevolence. Convinced the core of the blight lay within, he confided his discovery to his comrades and resolved to spearhead a strike. Employing his Ryuxing Dunsu, he carved a path through the throng of shadow creatures, his companions pressing close in a desperate thrust toward the tower. After a grueling engagement, they stood before the keep's sealed portal, its threshold ringed with insidious Jinji. Su-yi funneled his inner Ryuxing essence into the warding sigils, his hands weaving rapid seals as the elemental currents poured into the obstruction and contended violently with the dark enchantments. With the aid of his allies, he located a rupture in the defenses and forced the gates wide. The apparition revealed itself as the Heian Zizei, a towering sovereign of shadow veiled in a suffocating pall. He laughed with an eldritch chill and proclaimed their naivete. He unleashed formidable dark sorcery that suffused the tower with malignant fog, enveloping Su-yi and his allies. Su-yi erected a defense by invoking the ultimate codex of Ryuxing, fashioning a luminous barrier that fought back the corruption, while Lu Ruolai and the others cast their protective arts. The Heian Zuzei intensified his onslaught, flinging bars of abyssal light that scorched and slashed. Su-yi marshaled his Ryuxing to repulse each barrage, but the adversary's might strained him. In that crucible of combat, Su-yi recalled an ancient epiphany gleaned in forgotten ruins. He conjoined the 5 elements in an unprecedented synthesis, transmuting them into a singular enigmatic force and channeling it into the Ryuxing Shinkai, which erupted in prismatic radiance. Brandishing the relics, Su-yi charged. The clash between the relic's chromatic luminescence and the Heian Zuzai's murk birthed a blinding conflagration. The Dark Sovereign countered with banned rites, amplifying his power and spawning hideous phantoms from the fog. Su-yi cleaved through those specters with his Ryuxing swordcraft while probing for a decisive vulnerability. Amid the tumult, Su-yi perceived a fleeting flaw in the Heian Zuzai's ritual posture. Seizing the instant, he gathered every ounce of elemental vigor, lifting the Shinkai high and striking with apocalyptic intent. A prismatic blade of cataclysmic force lanced forth and struck home. The Heian Zuzei howled, crumpled, and the surrounding black fog unraveled as if a vast string had been severed. With the Dark Sovereign's fall, the malignant energy dissipated at once. The crystal at the tower's core fractured into ashes, and the myriad shadow creatures collapsed into motes of ash upon the floor. The threat that had threatened the world's balance was at last abated. Emerging from the keep, Su-yi and his companions beheld the world slowly reclaiming its luster. The heavens cleared to a pure azure, sunlight washed the earth in warmth, and people poured forth from their hamlets to hail their saviors with exultant acclamations. Gratitude and reverence greeted every step of the returning heroes. Su-yi and Lu Ruolai lingered within that world for a season, aiding in reconstruction and imparting methods of cultivation and survival to those who remained. Before their departure, the populace arranged an elaborate farewell to honor the dead of salvation. Bearing blessings and solemn gratitude, they bid the travelers farewell. Resolved to continue their odyssey, Su-yi and Lu Ruolai set forth once more. They knew the cosmos still harbored innumerable enigmas and perils, yet they took comfort in their unyielding convictions and potent abilities. Together, they would traverse further realms, guardians of peace and justice, ensuring that light would persist in illuminating every shadowed corner. Having bid farewell to the world of wonder, Su-yi and Lu Ruolai resumed their voyage through the vast silence of space. One afternoon, while Su-yi cultivated within the ship's quiet sanctum, a distant ancient power brushed his incessant implicative current of antiquity that seemed to call to him from the star-strewn void. Cautious, they drew nearer and felt the star's fierce embrace, gravitational eddies and volatile energy currents that threatened to rend the ship asunder. Su-yi reached inward with his cultivation, probing the star's essence. He discerned a force that resonated with the Wuxing, yet transcended it, an enigmatic current that hinted at the universe's deepest secrets. Compelled by curiosity and purpose, he resolved to attempt a landing. Clad in bespoke protective gear, they descended in a compact landing module. As they pierced the star's upper atmosphere, they were assailed by violent energy storms and arcane cosmic rays. The module's shields shuddered under the onslaught, strained to the point of collapse. In that perilous instant, Su-yi invoked the Hundun Yuxing Zongji Midian, channeling the Wu Xing into the barrier and fortifying it. Lu Ruolai, with cool determination, coaxed the craft through the maelstrom until by grit and skill they touched the star's surface. Below, a multi-hued mist lay, thick and luminous, swallowing sight and dampening sound. They stepped forward cautiously, senses sharpened, and soon discerned the silhouette of an immense ancient edifice. It had been wrought from an unfamiliar alloy, and its walls were inscribed with strange sigils and motifs that pulsed with latent meaning. Before Su-yi could fully absorb these revelations, a sonorous voice declared their transgression. From the light emerged a towering presence, an entity of formidable aura that spoke as the guardian of the place. It announced a triadic trial-off strength of wisdom and of spirit that must be overcome if they wished to depart with the star's blessing. The first trial was martial. The guardian unleashed a torrent of spirit that assailed them, and Su-yi responded with the Wu Xing sword techniques rendered with fierce elegance. Lu Ruolai lent her family's arts, weaving disruptions that hindered the guardian's motions. The guardian's assaults were relentless, and Protean Su-yi adapted, refining his tactics and amplifying his elemental harmonies. Gradually, he gained the ascendancy, and the guardian, acknowledging their prowess, brought the trial to a close. The second trial tested comprehension. The guardian posed abstruse inquiries about time, space, and the currents of energy, questions that probed the foundations of cultivation itself. Su-yi and Lu Ruolai pondered deeply, drawing upon the visions bestowed by the crystal and the wellsprings of their experience. Their answers were not merely correct, but reflective, infused with insight and creative synthesis. Pleased, the guardian pronounced their success. The final trial assailed the heart. The guardian cast illusions that manifested their deepest fears and most hidden desires, attempting to unmoor their spirits. They recognized the nature of the test and turned inward. Su-yi employed the cleansing disciplines of the Hundun Yuxing Zongji Midian to purify his mind. Lu Ruolai invoked the serene practices of her ancestral lineage to steady her soul. United in resolve, they dismantled the phantasms until the air itself steadied, and the guardian, satisfied, declared that they had passed all trials. Led to the sanctuary at the structure's core, they beheld a colossal crystal orb that harbored the star's central force and the distilled truths of the cosmos. The guardian pressed his hand to the orb, and a surging luminous current flowed into Su-yi and Lu Ruolai. In that influx, Su-yi's understanding of the Wu Xing ascended to a new plane. He integrated the star's paradigm with his own methods, and his capabilities leapt forward. Lu Ruolai likewise deepened her mastery of the family's rites, her power refined and magnified. Guided by the elder council of Zhenjiao Zhu, Su-yi and Lu Ruolai learn of an arcane, celestial body deep within the cosmos, known as Yuanjing Zhixin. Described as the crystallized residue of the universe's primal genesis, this mysterious heart is said to harbor a titanic force capable of restoring cosmic equilibrium. With hope braiding with steely resolve, they embark aboard their vessel, steering into the unfathomable velvet of deep space in search of this salvific locus. Their voyage is punctuated by anomalous phenomena that test both craft and spirit. On one occasion, their ship is swallowed by a nebula suffused with tenebrous energy. Viscous darkness corrodes the shields, and instruments falter beneath its influence. Su-yi channels the conjoined powers that reside within him, striving to dispel the malignant matter, only to find the darkness seemingly sentient, ravenously absorbing his spiritual radiance. Observing this, Lu Ruolai weaves an ancestral ward around the ship, slowing the corrosion and stabilizing Su-yi's output. Through synchronized exertion and arduous struggle, they discern a frailty in the nebula's pattern and exploit it to break free. Their combined artistry yields a tentative triumph as the whirl slows and a transient calm emerges. Seizing the moment, Su-yi pilots the ship through the attenuated storm. As they near the crystal, a searing beam erupts from Yuanjing Zhixin and bears down upon them. Both deploy their utmost defenses, and the beam battering the hull threatens to sunder shield and keel. In that critical instant, Su-yi's Xingpan flares with an intense, sympathetic radiance that harmonizes with the crystal's light. Enveloped by this concurrence, the vessel withstands the assault unscathed, and the destructive beam dissolves as if it had never been. After purifying the core world of Linghuan, Xingzi, Su-yi and Lu Ruolai found no respite. They understood that malevolent forces would not be easily quelled, and that the recently revived realms remained perilously vulnerable. Resolute, they prolonged their stay to purge lingering darkness and erect guardianship measures to protect the system. On Quolanxing, the contamination had consumed the waters. A lake once crystalline and sweet had turned ink-black and fetid. The Quolan Zoo living on its shore fell into stupor as the poisoned water drained their strength. Su Yi, invoking the purifying resonance of Yuan Jing's Hixin, descended into the abyss to seek the darkness origin, while Lu Ruolai tended the stricken, channeling pure spiritual energy to sustain their lives. Beneath the lake, a potent darkness lashed out at Su Yi, forcing him to wield the Wuxing Jianfa with relentless precision to fend off the assaults. His arduous search revealed a black crystal enshrouded in malevolent energy. Calling upon the esoteric wisdom of the Hundun, Wuxing Zongji Midian, he infused the elemental forces into the crystal. Under the onslaught of the fivefold power, the crystal fractured and the corrupt essence evaporated. When light returned to the water, the lake regained its clarity and breath of life. The Quolan Zoo awoke, showering Su Yi and Lu Ruolai with gratitude and offerings. The duo declined the gifts with gentle insistence, urging the people to guard their homeland and remain vigilant against any future encroachment of darkness. On Yinyanxing, the dark influence provoked volcanic fury. Rivers of lava engulfed vast expanses, and countless lives were imperiled. Arriving amid choking smoke, Lu Ruolai employed intricate hydrocharms to temper the eruption, while Su Yi penetrated the volcano to seek the source of the unrest. Inside the blistering chasm, he struggled through searing heat and noxious fumes until he discovered a ritual array siphoning the mountain's energy and instigating the eruption. Without hesitation, Su Yi launched a decisive assault on the array, his strikes guided by unyielding resolve. The formation unraveled beneath their onslaught, and the volcanic tantrum subsided. Together, they aided the survivors of Yinyanxing in rebuilding, instructing them in practices that would harness natural forces to avert future catastrophes. Throughout their sojourn in Linghuan Xingzi, Su Yi and Lu Ruolai imparted methods of cultivation and defenses against shadow to numerous peoples. Their efforts won universal esteem. Inhabitants hailed them as guardians of the system. Humble in victory, they nonetheless recognized that the cosmos contained innumerable crises yet unresolved. Once Linghuan Xingzi's wounds were healed, they prepared to depart and pursue the wider mandate of preservation. While voyaging through the void, their sensors intercepted an anomalous transmission of unnatural frequency traced to a distant sector named Huanying Xingzi. Intrigued and wary, they altered course. Approaching the system, they beheld a realm swathed in a spectral mist that softened starlight into a dreamlike gloom. Their vessel was seized by an unseen draft and drawn toward a colossal planet at the system's heart. They disembarked and advanced toward the array, met immediately by a tangible wave of malefic aura. Shadowed creatures assailed them in myriad forms. Su Yi cleaved through the onslaught with the disciplined elegance of the Wuxing Jianfa, while Lu Ruolai wove defensive and clarifying spells, probing for the array's vulnerabilities. Their path was arduous but steady until they reached the epicenter and beheld a voracious black vortex exhaling streams of corrupt power. Initial assaults at the vortex yielded little effect as the darkness rebounded with vicious ferocity. In that crucible, Su Yi remembered the latent potency of Yuan Jing's Hixin. He harmonized its purifying luminosity with the Wuxing Jianfa, forging an intensified blade of radiant quintessence. When he released that blade, a torrent of prismatic sword chi struck the vortex, which convulsed, shrank, and finally dissipated beneath the blinding radiance. The sealing array was renewed, and the planet's pall of mist began to lift. Returned unexpectedly to their ship by the sealing array's restorative surge, they watched Huanying Xingzi breathe anew as starlight rekindled. Their relief was tempered with solemn resolve. The cosmos remained beset with hidden threats, and their labors would continue. Compelled to investigate, Su Yi and Lu Ruolai voyaged to the chaotic threshold of Jinji Ji, where space and time themselves frayed. A black fog laced with aberrant lights swirled about them. They abandoned their craft and pressed forward by foot, encasing themselves in auras of warding to withstand the terrain's distortions. They encountered formidable beasts and relentless anomalies, yet their unity and skill overcame each trial. Deeper within the Forbidden Zone, their pursuit of traces led to a fortified stronghold nestled in a vast valley. Within, dark operatives labored around a colossal apparatus, channeling diverse energies into a pulsating, enigmatic sphere. Su Yi and Lu Ruolai seized the moment and struck with ferocity, igniting a fierce engagement. The stronghold's commander wielded arcana of formidable scope and rallied his forces with brutal efficiency. Enraged, the commander unleashed his final potency upon them. Su Yi and Lu Ruolai braced with the utmost defenses and met his assault head-on. In the culminating clash, the commander was overwhelmed, his form dissipating into a pall of black smoke. The stronghold collapsed into ruin, and the scheme to forge the doomsday device lay in tatters. Victorious, yet vigilant, Su Yi and Lu Ruolai recognized that the eradication of one cabal did not end the threat. Scattered remnants and fresh conspiracies would doubtless endure. Thus they resumed their odyssey through the boundless firmament, steadfast in the purpose of safeguarding the peace that fragile life required. After departing, Huanying, Xingzi, Su Yi, and Lu Ruolai traversed a cosmos whose placid appearance belied a festering peril. The dark forces like serpents concealed within shadowed folds lingered and schemed, their threat never fully abating. Guided by an unwavering conviction to safeguard the cosmos, the two navigated the starry expanse in their vessel, its course lit by the steady flame of their resolve. They anchored at the venerable supply world Xingqinji Lei to replenish energy reserves. The station resembled a bustling interstellar way station where travelers of myriad races and forms paused to exchange remarkable tales. Within its busy halls, energy fluctuations hummed in the air and unfamiliar dialects braided into a tapestry of sound. Amid that flux they encountered Ai Rook, a tall interstellar merchant whose skin bore a pale blue hue and whose jeweled attire bespoke a lifetime of voyages between the stars. At the margin, the scene that greeted them was terrifyingly sublime. A living black mist rolled and convulsed its surface, punctuated by uncanny glows. Erratic surges of raw energy thundered from the haze like the breath of a slumbering leviathan. Lu Ruolai squeezed Su Yi's hand, drawing fortitude from their shared warmth. Unspoken, they forged a pact of courage and stepped forward together into the unknown. Su Yi's mastery of the five-element sword art manifested as brilliant cleaving arcs that carved light through the gloom. His movements were a study in lethal elegance, each stroke suffused with elemental force. Lu Ruolai meanwhile wove intricate spells with nimble hands and haunting incantations, her radiant sigils, both shield and spear. Together their synergy rendered them a formidable pair, enabling them to repel waves of savage creatures and to press deeper into the forbidding land. From a hidden vantage, they watched the leader at the heart of the fortress overseeing a monstrous apparatus. Composed of alien metals and crystalline conduits, the machine pulsed with unnerving luminosity. Gargantuan pipes siphoned ambient power toward a central orb which intensified as energies were fed into it, radiating an escalating oppressive aura. Recognizing the orb as the linchpin of the weapon project, Su Yi and Lu Ruolai resolved to sabotage the device before it reached fruition. Amid the fray, Lu Ruolai moved like a will-o'-the-wisp, evading attacks and advancing upon the machine. She chanted her ancestral incantations and launched concentrated spells that repelled the oncoming tide. Su Yi battled with ferocious grace, each blow cleaving multiple foes, yet their adversary's chief proved formidable, his own arcane arts and overwhelming strength turning the duel into a desperate contest. The battle's tide threatened to swamp them, but tenacity and trust kept their spirits unbroken. Their combined onslaught shattered the regime's experiment. The machine convulsed, its conduits ruptured, and the central orb fractured into luminous fragments. Enraged, the faction's leader unleashed his last reserves of black power in a cataclysmic assault. Cloaked in infernal energy, he hurled himself towards Su Yi and Lu Ruolai, intent on annihilation. Unyielding, they formed an impenetrable defense. Su Yi fused elemental forces into a bulwark, while Lu Ruolai augmented it with layered enchantments until the attack detonated against their combined shield. The shockwave collapsed the valley's nearby crust and filled the air with dust and ruin. When the echo subsided, the leader's form unraveled into a curling plume of shadow and was gone. With their commander vanquished, the dark faction's cohesion collapsed and its forces scattered. Their vessel slid into the starfield, and their silhouettes became twin beacons against the Voituo guardians whose courage and fidelity would carry them onward through unknown perils, ever vigilant for the next shadow that might rise. Within the hush of the ship, Su Yi remained at the helm, his gaze fixed on a constellation of flickering instruments as his hands deftly corrected their course. Lu Ruolai, seated beside him, cradled an ancient tome and scrutinized its venerable wisdom in hopes of gleaning further hints about the malefic force they pursued. Their quiet reverie was fractured by the urgent keening of the ship's detectors, a jarring alarm that announced an anomaly beyond the reach of their previous charts. Exchanging a look that mingled perplexity with alertness, they set about analyzing the aberrant signal. Su Yi recalibrated the sensors while Lu Ruolai cross-referenced fragments of lore, and a hitherto unknown star system blossomed upon their displays. No archival record bore its name. The system arrived, as if conjured from the void. Lu Ruolai's brow knit with foreboding as she suggested the signal might be an echo of the darkness they had fought, and Su Yi, resolute, affirmed their resolve to investigate whatever lay ahead. They altered course toward the enigmatic system, and throughout the protracted voyage employed every instrument at their disposal to pry open its secrets. Yet their probes were met with an implacable silence, as though the region were sheathed in a veil of arcane obfuscation. The more the system resisted, the deeper their curiosity and wariness grew. Both felt an instinctive premonition that this stellar enclave would exact an unprecedented trial. With cautious skill, Su Yi piloted their craft into the system's interior, only to find space itself rebelling against convention. Navigation arrays faltered, instruments convulsed into erratic readings, and the ship shuddered, as if buffeted by invisible currents. Relying on his acute instincts and consummate piloting, Su-yi strove to maintain equilibrium, while Lu Ruolai concentrated her spiritual energies to shield them from the distorting influence and to discern whatever laws governed this place. At the ruin's heart, they discovered a vast temple whose doors were sealed and inscribed with sigils that pulsed with a tenuous luminescence. Su-yi sought to parse the runes with his cultivated spiritual acumen, and through patient deciphering realized the temple had been erected by the system's guardians to incarcerate an exceedingly malignant presence. Time had eroded the seal's potency, and the plaintive signal that had summoned them was in truth the temple's supplication for aid. Comprehending the gravity of their charge, Su-yi and Lu Ruolai resolved to fortify the waning seal before the evil could fully resurrect. Together they placed their hands upon the great doors and poured forth their inner energies. The portal groaned as it yielded. Within the dim sanctum, walls inlaid with faintly glowing crystals threw scarce light upon a central plinth where rested a sphere bathed in sable radiance, iron chains coiling around it like a cage fashioned to restrain a profound corruption. Emerging onto the planet's surface beneath the ordained firmament, Su-yi and Lu Ruolai took stations at 2 designated loci and drew upon their deepest reserves to harvest the stellar efflux. Celestial light coalesced into twin pillars that descended and suffused them with Xingqian Zhili, a surge of power unlike any they had known. Returning to the temple, they channeled that starlight into the runes upon the chains, restoring their clarity and briefly weakening the sphere's black aureole. In the crucible of despair, Su-yi drew upon a latent force he had gleaned in the Jinji Ji Dith primordial Hundun Zhili. He entwined that chaos-born potency with his sword technique and the Yuanjing Ji Zin's luminance, and the blade erupted in a transcendent light. The resulting sword chi, imbued with chaos, elemental harmony, and purifying heart, struck the blackness with a resonant concussion. The orb rent asunder, the malignant torrent was finally sealed once more. Silence settled like a benediction as the temple's darkness dissipated and calm returned. Exhausted yet gratified, Su-yi and Lu Ruolai surveyed the now stable sigils and elected to leave spiritual marks within the seal so that they might sense any future deterioration. Having secured the sanctuary, they embarked anew, their vessel departing the radiant system as it sent back a luminous farewell. They knew the cosmos still harbored innumerable enigmas and perils, but fortified by mutual trust and steadfast purpose, they sailed onward to write further chapters of their enduring saga. Their journey continued through the starry vastness, each horizon promising another test, though the locus and timing of the next menace remained unknown. Su-yi and Lu Ruolai were certain that together they would surmount whatever darkness sought to unmake the peace they pledged to defend. Thus their legend persisted, an ongoing chronicle of vigilance and courage framed against the infinite. As they entered the heart of the system, a powerful surge of dark energy assailed the ship. Instruments shrieked warnings while turbulence battered the hull. Su-yi's hands tightened on the controls, his mastery and fortitude the only anchors against the onslaught. Lu Ruolai channeled her spiritual energy, weaving pale luminescence about the craft to resist the corruption. Their light held, but weakened beneath the relentless tide of darkness. Then a faint beacon of light flickered on a nearby planet. Guided by that fragile glimmer, they descended to find a colossal edifice whose facade shimmered with a protective radiance as though warding off the encroaching gloom. The structure was fashioned from an unfamiliar alloy and stone, its surfaces carved with arcane runes and motifs. Above the sealed gate, an immense eye was etched, its gaze alight with inscrutable intent. They elected to separate. Su-yi plunged into the deeper caverns where the key of courage was said to sleep amid peril. Ferocious dark creatures assailed him, colossal and swift, their eyes aflame with predation. Unflinching, Su-yi unleashed the Yuxing Jianfa blade art that cleaved through shadow with searing precision. Drawing upon the Yuanjing Jixian, he fused its essence into his technique. The sword's radiance swelled into a tempest of chromatic energy that dispersed the horde. In the gloomy heart of the den, he discovered a golden sword, its blade inscribed with mysterious glyphs, the key of courage. Meanwhile, Lu Ruolai navigated a labyrinth of puzzles and hidden traps, for the key of wisdom lay behind riddles that tested intellect and discernment. With calm acuity, she parsed equations etched in stone and discerned patterns in seemingly mundane details. In an ancient library, she unearthed a venerable codex whose cover bore the emblem of the wisdom key. As she absorbed its contents, insight flowed through her, and when she closed the tome, a blue key of light coalesced, wisdom made tangible. Though this chapter of darkness had been driven back and Lulin Xingzi had been restored, Su-yi and Lu Ruolai understood the cosmos still harbored countless shadows. They bade farewell to the rescued world and resumed their voyage aboard the vessel, their silhouettes steadfast beneath the astral canopy. Thus they continued to etch their legacy across the heavens, guardians of peace who would press onward wherever darkness threatened the light. In the boundless expanse of the cosmos, Su, Yi, and Lu Rulai pilot their vessel like twin beacons resolute in their guardianship of interstellar peace. Since their deliverance of the Lulin Xingzi, they have permitted themselves no respite, acutely aware that the shadowed forces ever lurk like a persistent specter and that danger may spring from any hidden nook of the universe. The ship glided with serene precision through the silent void. Su Yi remained at the helm, his gaze fixed upon the oscillating instruments, hands deftly guiding the course. Beside him, Lu Ruolai cradled an ancient tome, poring over its ancestral wisdom in hopes of gleaning further insights into the malignant forces that menaced the stars. Abruptly, the detectors emitted a shrill alarm that shattered the cabin's hush. They exchanged a swift, guarded look. Su Yi scanned the readings, and his expression tightened. Anomalous energy fluctuations had been detected ahead, indicative of a vast Sukong Li Feng. Lu Ruolai closed the book and approached the console, brow furrowed. Such fissures, she reminded him, are rumored to bridge disparate dimensions and teem with unfathomable peril. Su Yi nodded with solemn resolve. Whatever lay beyond might be entwined with the encroaching darkness, and they must investigate. Drawing nearer to the fissure, the vessel encountered a peculiar, potent disturbance, as if an invisible hand were tugging at its hull. Su Yi gripped the controls and fed power to the engines to steady their approach. Lu Ruolai channeled her spirit energy and wove a protective barrier around the ship to counteract the external interference. They circled cautiously, searching for a passage through the tumultuous eddies of energy. The fissure's fluctuations rendered their navigation systems unreliable, instruments spasmed, and data cascaded into chaos. Relying on instinct and consummate piloting skills, Su Yi threaded the vessel between violent currents while Lu Ruolai sustained their ward against the surrounding distortions. Suddenly, a lance of concentrated energy shot forth from the rift, streaking toward them. Su Yi reacted instantly, maneuvering to evade. The beam scarred the ship's flank, and the impact rocked the cabin, scattering loose equipment. Lu Ruolai steadied herself upon a seat as the tremor subsided. She observed that the blast seemed neither random nor indiscriminate, but calculated attempts to repel intruders from the fissure's edge. Seizing an opportunity in the chaotic cadence of the assaults, Su Yi identified a relatively quiescent corridor of energy and steered them through. As they neared the lip of the breach, an increasingly relentless pull sought to draw them inward. Engines strained, and the vessel faltered until, at the brink of entrapment, Su Yi summoned the power of the Yuanjing Xian and infused it into the drive. The surge revitalized their propulsion, resisting the Ma's suction, and they passed beyond the threshold into the rift itself. Prepared for conflict, Su Yi unleashed the Yuxing Jianfa, each stroke suffused with chromatic force, while Lu Ruolai cast intricate spells that unfurled like radiant constellations. The fissure erupted in a tempest of light and power as they repelled wave after wave of assault. Their techniques blazed with consummate vigor, severing strikes and luminescent spells, leaving the void momentarily illuminated. Their combined onslaught cleaved through the ranks, dissipating the creatures into motes of light. Taking advantage of the reprieve, they pressed onward and broke free from the encircling beasts. Deeper within the fissure, they discovered a colossal ebony sphere, its surface suffused with oppressive dark energy, encircled by concentric shadowed rings. The presence of this orb exuded a profound malevolence that set their hearts on edge. As they approached, the sphere convulsed and unleashed a torrent of dark power that lashed at their ward. The shield buckled under pounding reverberations, hairline fissures spidering across its surface. Just when their defenses threatened to fail, Su Yi called upon the disparate arcane forces he had gathered across star systems and channeled them into the failing barrier. The shield flared with renewed brilliance, diverting the onslaught long enough for them to mount a decisive counterstrike. Uniting their most formidable techniques, Su Yi's swordwork and Lu Ruoli's sorcery struck the sphere in tandem. Radiance incinerated the pall of gloom until the orb shuddered, and its dark energies thinned, revealing beneath the dissipating shadow an enigmatic rune pulsing faintly with latent light. The inscription proved to be an ancient seal containing an abyssal evil that, if sundered, would unleash a cataclysm upon the cosmos. The Sukong Li Feng had served as the clandestine conduit for those who sought to breach the seal. Recognizing the gravity of their charge, Su Yi and Lu Ruolai infused their essences into the rune, augmenting the lock's potency. The seal brightened, and its binding power strengthened. Yet before they could secure it entirely, a cohort of dark mages emerged, brandishing shadow staves and incanting baleful rites. They wove their sorceries into a grim lattice intended to shatter the seal and unleash the imprisoned malice. A fierce confrontation ensued. The mages' eldritch barges combined into a single intricate formation that intensified their destructive output. Observing the interplay of their spells, Su Yi discerned a nexus where the mages' energies converged. He relayed the vulnerability to Lu Ruolai, and they struck at the junction with concentrated might. Su-Yi's ultimate Wuxing strike, augmented by Lu Ruoli channeled spellcraft, severed the linkage and fractured the formation. Bereft of their coordinated matrix, the dark mages faltered and were undone one by one beneath Su-Yi and Lu Ruoli's relentless counteroffensive. With the threat abated, the residual shadow dissipated, and the thrust of darkness within the fissure began to ebb. The seal's luminescence solidified as their contributions took permanent hold. Exhausted yet fulfilled, Su-Yi and Lu Ruoli emerged from the Sukong Lifeng and returned to the luminous emptiness of the greater cosmos. They understood that the darkness would not be vanquished with a single victory, and that trials yet waited upon their path. Nevertheless, fortified by unwavering conviction to safeguard the universe's tranquility, they resumed their voyage across the stellar sea, their deeds inscribed as another chapter in the enduring legend of guardianship. Amid the boundless firmament, Su-Yi and Lu Ruoli pilot their vessel with resolute purpose, continuing their solemn vigil for cosmic harmony. The aftermath of the Sukong Lifeng confrontation has left them acutely aware of the ceaseless machinations of shadowed powers. Tranquility in the cosmos is precarious and demands perpetual vigilance. Their ship slips through the river of stars like a living luminary, charting a course toward uncharted horizons. The signal's pattern is singular and stable, as if encoding a deliberate message. After meticulous analysis, they trace it to a remote, unrecorded planet. Exchanging a look of mutual resolve, they alter their heading and accelerate toward the unknown, their minds attuned to both hope and caution. During the protracted interstellar transit, they scour every archive aboard the ship for any mention of the world, but find nothing. The planet is an enigmatic blind spot in the annals of exploration, as if it had only now congealed from the cosmic mists. The absence of records only heightens their anticipation. Careful and reverent, Su-Yi pilots the ship down to a sweeping meadow. The air that greets them is crisp and laced with subtle floral notes and the loam's warm scent. Winds roll the grasses into undulating waves, and sunlit ridgelines glimmer with gilded hues. Distant peaks are capped in immaculate snow, painting a scene of improbable serenity. Their vigilance remains unrelenting. As they survey the meadow, a diminutive creature darts forward, its body sheathed in iridescent scales, eyes bright as faceted gems. Instead of flight, it approaches with curious trust. Lu Ruoli kneels and extends a gentle hand. The creature nuzzles her palm, then scampers away, glancing back as though to beckon them to follow. Heeding the creature's invitation, they thread through tall grasses into a clearing dominated by an ancient ruin. Gigantic stones are assembled with austere grace, their surfaces carved with cryptic runes and time-worn motifs. The edifice exudes an ancestral mystery, its sealed gate radiates the hush of a history suspended. At the threshold, Su-Yi and Lu Ruoli place their palms upon the gate and channel their lingli. The ancient door trembles, releases a deep, resonant tone, and slowly yields. They step into an interior where dim crystal facets inset into the walls shed a muted luminescence, and the floor bears labyrinthine glyphs, hinting at concealed mechanisms. Each step is measured to avoid awakening latent perils. At the heart of the hall stands an imposing statue of a robed sage clutching a radiant crystal orb. As they approach, the orb emits a concentrated beam and coalesces into the spectral visage of an elder whose countenance is both benign and penetrating. He greets them as the guardian of the vanished civilization, acknowledging that they have answered the long-awaited call. No sooner has the knowledge been imparted than specters materialize an onslaught of illusionary beasts spawned by the trials of the relic. Su-Yi and Lu Ruoli summon their hard-won abilities. Su-Yi manifests the Wuxing Jianfa with incisive multicolored sword chi that rends the phantasmal assailants, while Lu Ruoli weaves luminous incantations that arc like meteors through the dusk, denying the creature's approach. They quickly discern that mere surface assault only repels these apparitions. To vanquish them, they must render their strikes substantial. Adapting, Su-Yi condenses his lingli into tangible blade energy that severs at the core of the illusions. Lu Ruoli compresses her spells into concentrated surges that deliver decisive ruptures. Their combined mastery and tacit understanding dissolve the remaining foes until the hall returns to a profound silence. The Guardian's image reappears with a benediction of approval. The crystal orb ascends and bathes them in a purifying brilliance. In that luminous crucible, their intrinsic strengths are amplified, and their comprehension of darkness deepens. They have been endowed with the ancient inheritance and the mandate to wield it against encroaching shadows. Emerging from the ruins with the iridescent creature at their side, Su-Yi and Lu Ruoli feel the weight of newfound responsibility balanced by resolute purpose. They bid farewell to the placid planet and reboard their vessel, their silhouettes framed against the starlit expanse. Carrying the hope and power of a lost civilization, they set forth once more to confront the darkness and to preserve the fragile peace of the cosmos, their journey destined to continue across the infinite night. In the boundless expanse of the cosmos, Su, Yi, and Lu Ruolai, bearers of the ancient legacy from the Shenmi Zinkang, pilot their vessel with resolute grace, continuing their vigil for universal peace. Their trials upon that enigmatic world have augmented their prowess, yet they remain acutely aware that the shadows will not relinquish their ambitions lightly. The peril that stirs across the stars has only just begun. Lu Ruolai glanced at Su, Yi, concern shadowing her gaze. Shugwang, Lianmeng. This sounds dire. We must investigate at once. Su Yi's expression hardened. He altered their course, steering the ship toward the signal's origin. While en route, they scoured their ship's database and learned that Shugwang Lianmeng was an interstellar confederation of planets long committed to preserving regional peace and stability, renowned throughout the sector for its principled stewardship. Su Yi's reply was a cold, unwavering defiance. We will not stand idle while the dark forces ravage the innocent. This ends today. The Dark Fleet responded in silence and unleashed a barrage of inky energy beams that pelted their craft like a storm of shards. Su Yi maneuvered with masterful agility, evading torrents of destructive fire. Lu Ruolai, focused and composed, directed the ship's weapons with unerring accuracy, each discharge seeking the vital points of their opponents. The confrontation intensified as the enemy multiplied, and their assault grew more ferocious. Their shields sagged under sustained onslaught. Su Yi, sensing the peril, drew upon the Shenmi Zinkeo legacy's arcane understanding of spatial law. He fashioned a localized warp distortion around the vessel. The incoming black beams bent and dispersed as they entered the altered field, their trajectories betrayed and rendered harmless. Seizing the opportunity, Lu Ruolai concentrated fire upon the energy core of a leading dreadnought. With a thunderous detonation, the warship disintegrated into a constellation of fragments. They alighted cautiously upon the planet's surface and were besieged at once by abominable denizens. Towering scale-armored beasts spewed ebony flames and surged upon them with predatory ferocity. Su Yi drew his blade and unleashed the five-element sword technique he had honed through the Shenmi Zinka legacy, a kaleidoscope of radiant sword chi that cleaved through several creatures in an instant. Lu Ruolai invoked potent spells, beams of luminous power emanating from her palms, to pierce the gloom and repel their assailants. Exploiting the confusion, Su Yi and Lu Ruolai pierced the encirclement and pressed toward the ancient ruin. Their path was strewn with trap spikes hidden beneath the soil and massive stones hurled from above it, the tenets imparted by the Shenmi Zinkayu, and their seamless cooperation saw them safely through each hazard. At last they arrived before a sealed gate etched with enigmatic runes that thrummed with archaic potency. Su Yi attuned his spirit to the sigils, and after concerted effort discerned the key to their opening. The gate yielded, exhaling a smell of antiquity and secrets long dormant. Within the ruin, a labyrinth unfurled. Phantom lights danced upon the walls, and the floor was inscribed with bewildering schematics. They proceeded with measured caution, each step a careful study of the surrounding wards. In a misstep, Lu Ruolai inadvertently triggered a mechanism, and the ground sundered beneath them, revealing an abyss from which writhing black tendrils surged. Su Yi reacted with instantaneous resolve, grasping Lu Ruolai and severing the onrushing appendages with precise sword chi. They located and pressed a concealed switch along the masonry. The tendrils retracted, and the chasm resealed. Deeper in the heart of the ruin, they discovered the sanctum that housed the Shugwang Zhixin. It lay upon a monumental stone dais, radiating a pure, blinding brilliance girdled by a tempest of potent energies. Before they could advance, the Heian Yuhui's leader materialized, cloaked in sable raiment, his eyes ablaze with rapacity and malice. So you have come, Su Yi, Lu Ruolai, he intoned. The Shugwang Zhixin shall be mine this day. He conjured coils of shadow and launched relentless spells of corruption. Su Yi and Lu Ruolai erected a luminous barrier and countered with the full force of their arts. Su Yi's five-element swordsmanship, augmented by the Shenmi Zinko legacy, met Lu Ruolai's most devastating incantations as they clashed with the Heian Yuhui leader in a titanic duel. The adversary's sorcery was mercurial and devastating, yet the pair's synchronization and mutual support rendered them a formidable bulwark. It was in the midst of that fierce exchange that Su Yi noticed a fleeting lull preceding the leader's most cataclysmic assaults. He exploited this temporal aperture, unleashing his concentrated might in a blade strike of overwhelming force. The leader staggered, grievously wounded, and strove to retaliate with desperate violence. At the decisive moment, Lu Ruolai invoked a constraining spell drawn from the Shenmi Zinkeu inheritance, briefly binding the leader in chains of stasis. Seizing the opening, Su Yi lunged forward and claimed the Shugwang Zhixin. With the artifact in their possession, the leader's dominion weakened, as though a sustaining necklace had been unclasped. His malignant form dissolved into a roiling plume of darkness and dispersed into oblivion. Victorious, Su Yi and Lu Ruolai carried the Shugwang Zhixin back to Shugwang Lianmeng. The denizens greeted their return with exultant acclaim and profound gratitude. Su-yi entrusted the relic to the Alliance's care and admonished them to safeguard it against future predations. Having fulfilled their charge, Su-yi and Lu Ruolai once again boarded their vessel and resumed their peregrination among the stars. They understood all too well that the Heian Yuhui would not relent. Greater challenges lay on the horizon, but they were untroubled by the prospect. Bolstered by an unshakable conviction to preserve cosmic harmony and the companionship they shared, they remained steadfast guardians of the universe. Su-yi and Lu Ruolai departed from Shugwang Lianming and sailed their starcraft through the silent expanse, vigilant against any stirrings of the dark forces. The ship hummed with routine telemetry until an abrupt, uncanny alarm shattered the hush. Su-yi scanned the sensors and found an uncharted sector where energy fluctuations surged with unnatural intensity, as though a formidable presence thrummed beneath the void. As they closed in, a relentless gravitational pull began to seize the ship, tugging it as if toward an abyss. Su-yi clenched the controls, sweat beading on his brow, and wrestled the craft into steadier vectors. Lu Ruolai concentrated, weaving a luminous barrier of spiritual energy about the hull to shield them from the emergent distortions. Their teamwork kept the ship from succumbing to the maw of the unknown. They entered gingerly and were immediately assailed by an oppressive weight that scrambled instruments and warped readings. The navigation panels erupted with confusion, yet Su-yi's iron resolve and deft piloting steadied them through the turbulence. Lu Ruolai extended her senses and perceived numerous vitality trace effervescences, faint and entrapped, as if held captive within the realm's marrow. Deeper within, they discovered a colossal dark fortress rising into the astral mists. Its walls were hewn from black stone and exuded a cold malevolence. A ring of ink-dark fog circled the stronghold, intermittently lit by unnatural glints. No sooner had Su-yi and Lu Ruolai touched down than monstrous denizens swarmed from every shadow. Some were titanic scale-clad behemoths whose steps shuddered the ground, others darted like obsidian lightning, ephemeral and lethal. All bore predatory hunger in their eyes. Su-yi drew his blade and unleashed the Yuxing Jianfa, the sword flashing with prismatic energies. The rippling sword chi felled the nearest attackers with precise, disciplined arcs. Lu Ruolai countered with cascades of scintillant spells, each conjuration blossoming like a small star that pierced the fog and banished the creatures caught within. The enemy's assaults were stranger and more coordinated than any they had faced, but the pair's synergy and prowess allowed them to wrest the initiative. As the battle wore on, Su-yi infused his swordplay with the secret legacy of the mysterious planet they had once encountered, sharpening each strike with purifying light. His movements became a lethal dance, each cut sending ripples of cleansing force through the ranks of darkness. Lu Ruolai modulated her incantations to complement his strikes, her sorcery detonating into brilliant motes that struck true and unrelenting. They fought their way to the fortress gate, where seals of obscure runes emanated a black luminescence meant to bar entry. Su-yi applied his insight, tracing the characters with focused intent and letting his spiritual energy flow into their pattern. After a tense effort, the glyphs flared, and the massive doors trembled open, admitting them into a corridor thick with rot and stale shadow. Within the great hall, they found a vast magic circle throbbing with sable light and populated by anguished souls, their essences twisted and entangled by the ritual's cruelty. Around the circle stood hooded figures in black robes, staffs in hand, their voices weaving the incantation that fed the array. Su-yi and Lu Ruolai realized these acolytes were agents of the dark forces, siphoning the Star Realm's life to fuel some horrific end. The pair launched themselves into combat. Black spells erupted from the robed mages and collided with Su-yi's blazing sword chi, creating eruptions of thunderous sound. Lu Ruolai struck from the flanks, casting disruptive enchantments that unsettled enemy spellcraft. Observing closely, Su-yi discerned that the mages' power was interlinked through their staffs. Severing those conduits would fracture their coordinated defense. Seizing the opportunity, Su-yi unleashed a focused blade torrent aimed precisely at one staff. The attack shattered the instrument and severed that mage's connection to his fellows. Lu Ruolai followed with a disruptive charm that threw the robed practitioners into a frenzy of disordered energy. Stripped of unified strength, the adversaries fell beneath the combined onslaught of Su-yi's enhanced Yuxing Jianfa, now further amplified by the latent force of the Yuanjing Xian infusion. With the mages defeated, the magic circle dimmed, and the imprisoned souls were freed. Their essences coalesced into a towering spirit of gratitude that spoke in a voice both mournful and relieved. It identified this place as Shiluo Xingzhou, once prosperous and vibrant until the dark invaders laid claim and enslaved its souls. The spirit revealed the locus of the realm's Korathi Yuanjing Xian, the crystalline heart, whose radiance could dispel the darkness if properly released. Guided by the liberated spirits, Su, Yi, and Lu Rulai traversed deeper into the star realm, overcoming ambushes and cunning traps through a mixture of martial finesse and sorcerous ingenuity. At last they entered a cavern where an immense crystal pulsed with pure, blazing light. Before they could reach it, the leader of the dark forces emerged cloaked in night and exuding a ravenous, covetous glare. He challenged them, launching a barrage of formidable dark magics. At the crucial instant, Su Yi harmonized the ancestral planetary vigor with the awakening power of the Yuanjing Xin and delivered a singular transcendent stroke. A kaleidoscopic beam of purifying light cleaved the darkness, striking the leader with unstoppable force. He was consumed by illumination and dispersed into a shadow that dissolved into nothingness. With the fall of the Dark Commander, the malignant influence unraveled. Su Yi and Lu Rulai approached the crystalline heart and touched it together. Its radiance swelled and flooded the star realm, restoring starlight, reviving nebular flows, and suffusing every corner with renewed vitality. The freed souls offered their blessings, and the once lost Shiluo Xingja began to breathe and bloom anew. Having witnessed the realm's redemption, Su Yi and Lu Rulai bid farewell to the spirits and boarded their ship. They resumed their odyssey through the cosmos, conscious that darkness yet lingered elsewhere, but emboldened by their shared resolve and the conviction to continue safeguarding the peace of the universe. Across the boundless firmament, Su Yi and Lu Rulai pilot their vessel with unwavering vigilance, guardians of a fragile cosmic peace. Since the cataclysm at the fractured dimension, they have scarcely rested, acutely aware that malevolent forces lurk in shadow. The universe's tranquility flickers like a candle in the wind. As they alter course for Huanming Xingyuan, an unsettling transformation takes hold of the surrounding heavens. Once-ordered constellations grow sparse, and misaligned starlight shivers as if shrouded by an unseen haze. The nearer they draw, the more the cosmos itself seems to unspool. At the threshold of the abyss, they behold a vast, dreamlike nebula, iridescent yet elusive, within which colossal vortices of energy twist into enigmatic light gates. On entering, the ship convulses as instruments cascade into spasms and the readouts lose coherence. Lu Rulai channels her spirit into a fragile ward to blunt the interference, while Su Yi, by sheer skill and resolve, wrestles the helm to keep them whole. They are soon surrounded by strange, semi-translucent beings, living filaments of light that alter their form from humanoid silhouettes into scattering motes. Their crystalline calls bore into the mind, conjuring vivid hallucinations. Su Yi's weapons fail to touch them, the creatures dodge with preternatural grace. Lu Rulai senses a malignant intelligence twisting perception itself. She conjures a purifying radiance which sears through the phantasms, dispersing the luminous life forms and clearing the air. Deeper within the nebula, they discover an immense city suspended upon crystalline filaments, its architecture woven of faintly glowing crystals in peculiar geometric lattices. The metropolis is unervingly silent, its streets devoid of motion. Within a towering structure, they find a frail, half-luminous being beside an unstable energy core, its breath scarcely a whisper. Bent with compassion, Lu Rulai lays hands upon it and pours her spirit into its veins until it wakes. Without hesitation, Su Yi and Lu Rulai set forth. In Huanming Migong, the walls are woven from shimmering mist, and paths transmute beneath their feet. Terrifying apparitions and voracious phantasmal beasts assail them. Su Yi parries with his Yuxing Jianfa, a sword technique honed to ruthless clarity, while he channels the power of the Yuanjing's Hixin into searing bladey energy, exploiting the brief tremors that precede each attack. Together they carve a path to the maze's heart and claim the first key, a cool blue artifact etched with cryptic runes. In the Huanying Senlin, a suffocating fog traps memory in looping scenes, forcing Lu Rulai to relive tender moments with Su Yi until each iteration ends in despair. She steadies herself by silently reciting the shared moments that bind them, and Su Yi, sensing her falter, grips her hand and calls her back to reality. Their mutual resolve breaks the cycle, and they recover the second key, a verdant emblem concealed within a hollow trunk. The final trial awaits in Huanwang Rongdong, a cavern of kaleidoscopic crystals and treacherous mechanisms. The chamber bristles with energy traps, and when they approach the crystalline pool, where the last key floats, a surge of water elementals erupts. In combat, Su Yi adapts his swordwork, infusing it with fire-laced spirit to exploit the elemental's weakness, while Lu Rulai pinpoints and sears their vulnerabilities with incisive spells. After a fierce struggle, the water creatures dissipate, and the third key is seized. Returning to the citadel, they insert the 3 Huanming Yaeshi into the core's receptacles. Light blossoms across the runes as the curse unravels, the energy field steadies, and the chaotic vortices subside. The suspended city rekindles life, stirring as inhabitants emerge, blinking in renewed sunlit grace. The rescued denizens offer gratitude to Su Yi and Lu Rulai. Boarding their ship, once more Su, Yi, and Lu Ruolai depart, Huanming Xingyuan with the knowledge that darkness will not rest, but with hearts fortified by companionship and conviction. They continue their vigil among the stars, resolute guardians of a fragile peace. After departing, Huanming Xingyuan, Su, Yi, and Lu Ruolai traversed the cosmos with practiced vigilance. Though the galaxy wore a facade of calm, both knew that the malignant shadow which had arisen could resurge without warning. They moved relentlessly from system to system, scrutinizing every anomaly in cosmic energy and remaining perpetually alert to the faintest whisper of danger. During a routine patrol, a frantic transmission shattered the retina, a voice laced with terror and despair pleading for aid from the edge of Shazingzi. A mining world famed for its rare ores had come under assault by an unknown force. The ship's corridors reverberated with distant explosions and cries as Su Yi recalibrated their course. Without hesitation, they accelerated toward the beleaguered planet, consulting the ship's intelligence arrays en route and learning that the planet's mineral yield was essential for forging advanced energy crystals and weaponry assets certain to attract covetous factions. Perceiving this vulnerability, Su Yi called out a decisive strategy. Lu Ruolai adjusted their targeting to concentrate on the connectivity nodes linking the enemy vessels. A focused laser carved through armor and struck a pivotal node, provoking a cascade of failures that briefly crippled nearby ships. Seizing the window, Su Yi closed in with ferocious precision, employing close-quarters armaments to finish disabled vessels. Their synchronized tactics turned the tide in the heavens, yet both understood this repulse was only a prelude. A deeper conspiracy lurked behind the attack. Approaching Inying Xingchuan, their vessel encountered a palpable darkness that clawed at shields and instruments alike. Su Yi throttled power and deployed the ship's maximum defenses to breach the oppressive field. Once inside the cluster, they were beset by nightmarish flying entities, bat-like silhouettes with vast wings that shimmered in malignant violet and vomited corrosive black flame. Su Yi answered with the Yuxing Jianfa arcs of blade energy that cleaved through the swarm, while Lu Ruolai unleashed disciplined spells, torrents of luminescence that illuminated the void and exposed the creature's vulnerabilities. The beast's corrosive onslaught eroded shielding, forcing Su Yi to combine martial finesse with the enhancing influence of Yuanjing's Hixin to maintain distance and blunt their ferocity. A prismatic blade of light cleaved through the chamber and struck the leader with cataclysmic force. He disintegrated into a wisp of shadow, and the cabal's cohesion crumbled into chaos. Seizing the opportunity, Su Yi and Lu Ruolai sabotaged the energy core and demolished the nascent weapon, igniting chain reactions that consumed the citadel in roaring explosions. They withdrew as the fortress imploded and the Blackstone stronghold yielded to ruin. When the conflagration subsided and the smoke cleared, the two stood beneath the scattered constellations, their resolve steadier for the trial they had endured. Having averted a catastrophe, they resumed their guardianship of the stars, their deeds set to echo across the void and kindle courage in those who would oppose the encroaching darkness. Having dismantled the shadow nest and foiled the conspiracy to forge a superweapon, Su Yi and Lu Ruolai resumed their vigil across the cosmos. They did not indulge in triumph. Both understood that darkness is like a serpent concealed in the gloom, poised to strike anew. Aboard their ship, they patrolled with unwavering attention, refusing to neglect any corner that might harbor peril. On a patrol through an ancient, enigmatic star sector, Su Yi tended the helm with steady hands while his eyes read the vessel's oscillating instruments. Lu Ruolai sifted through interstellar logs at his side, searching the archives for traces left behind by the malignant force. The ship's sensors then erupted with a shrill alarm, shattering the cabin's stillness and revealing a bizarre, potent energy fluctuation emanating from deep within the sector. Realizing they might have uncovered the key to the shadow's enigma, the pair resolved to enter. Pressing their palms against the portal, they pulled their life force until the great gate trembled and opened with a low, sonorous rumble. An ancient, musty breath exhaled from within, and they stepped into the dim interior with vigilant caution. The trial of wisdom presented a hall lined with archaic instruments and walls etched with complex mathematical and physical formulae. They were allotted but a finite span to unravel the riddles that barred their path. Deep within one puzzle lay a particularly thorny enigma concerning cosmic origins and energy transmutation. Su Yi pondered, recalling the revelations gleaned within the ruin, while Lu Ruolai, meticulous and observant, discerned a concealed clue tied to the peculiar energy fluctuation that had drawn them here. Their insights converged, combining intellect and intuition. They deciphered the puzzles and advanced. The final trial unfolded in a chamber suffused with warmth and light, strewn with drifting blossoms and stardust. To pass, they had to manifest the power of love and awaken the sleeping guardian. Closing their eyes, they summoned memories of mutual support and the countless moments of shared courage that had bound them together. Compassion for all life rose within them, and a soft, luminous radiance blossomed between their hands. That light reached into the chamber's depths and stirred the guardian spirit, a towering being of radiant shadow, whose gaze held both tenderness and relief. The guardian proclaimed that they had proven worthy to bear the force that could re-establish balance. It poured that ancient inheritance into Su, Yi, and Lu Ruolai. A warm, potent energy suffused their bodies, instilling newfound clarity and an elevated comprehension of light and darkness in concert. With this gift, they emerged from the relic resolved and strengthened, ready to meet future upheavals and to defend the cosmos. Their trials within the origin site would remain a wellspring of strength, guiding them as they continued their solemn guardianship of universal peace. Beneath the boundless canopy of stars, Su, Yi, and Lu Ruolai sat amid the aftermath of a fierce engagement, their vessel bearing the blackened scars of conflict. Scorch marks glimmered under distant starlight as the ship drifted with a wary grace. Su, Yi, ensconced in the cockpit, guided the instruments with practiced hands, his brow furrowed as he meticulously assessed structural damage. Beside him, Lu Ruolai cradled a pristine cloth, methodically wiping residue of the dark energy from her weapon. Her gaze, keen and contemplative, betrayed a vigilance that had not been dulled by victory. The silence between them was pale and tentative until Lu Ruolai observed the enemy's behavior. She remarked that the assault had felt like a probe rather than a full-scale onslaught. Su, Yi conceded her intuition, noting the attackers' restraint as if they awaited some unseen signal. Their debate was abruptly interrupted when the ship's sensors emitted a shrill alarm. A rabid red glow erupted on the displays, revealing a violent and chaotic energy signature emanating from an uncharted galaxy. En route, every sensor aboard the craft strained to penetrate a veil of obfuscation. The mysterious sector resisted scrutiny, offering only the persistent pulse of the energy anomaly and little else. Su, Yi engaged the helm and plotted contingencies through his mind, approaches retreats, lines of defense, while Lu Ruolai reviewed past encounters with the darkness, seeking patterns that might illuminate their present predicament. Together, they navigated by instinct and experienced, two sentinels steering toward a gathering storm. Careful and deliberate, Su, Yi piloted the vessel inward. The moment they breached the storm's margin, a barrage of energy battered the hull, sending the ship into violent convulsions. Su, Yi's fingers tightened on the controls, sweat beading on his forehead as he countered each wave. Lu Ruolai answered with her own mastery, weaving a luminous protective field of cultivated power around the craft. Her barrier shivered beneath the onslaught, but held a fragile sanctuary of will against the storm's appetite. Moved by compassion and strategy alike, Su, Yi, and Lu Ruolai elected to aid the stricken beings. They maneuvered the ship close to one leviathan being tugged by a nearby vortex, while Lu Ruolai opened a communication channel, attempting to establish rapport through tones and harmonics calibrated to the creature's resonant frequencies. Gradually, the dialogue, tentative but genuine, disclosed that these entities were indigenous to the system, their existence entwined with the planets now sundered by the mysterious surge of energy. Their world had been ruptured overnight by an invasive influence that had overturned the cosmic balance. Renewed with purpose, Su, Yi, and Lu Ruolai pressed toward the storm's heart. Each approach intensified the assault on their protective field until hairline fractures appeared across its surface. The pressure was immense, yet neither yielded. Their determination derived not merely from duty, but from an allegiance to the fragile tapestry of life woven throughout the galaxy. Without warning, guardians of shadow surged from the void. Clad in coal-black armor and bearing weapons that pulsed with malevolent force, they bore an expressionless ruthlessness. In an instant, they closed upon Su, Yi, and Lu Ruolai. Su, Yi drew his sword and unleashed the 5 elements sword technique, each stroke igniting blades of color that braided through the dimness. Lu Ruolai countered with incantations wreathed in scintillant spells that struck like lightning across the gloom. Their assault was a dance of precision and courage. The foe's armor proved tenacious, ordinary strikes ricocheted against the plated joints. Observant in combat, Su, Yi discerned structural vulnerabilities at those articulated seams. He adapted, concentrating his sword energy into coordinated thrusts aimed at those weak points, while Lu Ruolai ramped her sorcery toward the opponent's crests and backs. Their concerted effort created fissures in the guards' defenses, and with grim determination, they carved a path to the sorcerer's circle. Before the orb, the malevolence condensed into an avatar, dark sovereign. Cloaked in shadow and masked in cruelty, he revealed only eyes that burned with malevolent resolve. He proclaimed in a voice like dry thunder his intent to wield the dark orb to dominion over the cosmos. He then brandished a staff and unleashed a torrent of nocturnal spells that fell upon Su, Yi, and Lu Ruolai like meteor showers of ink. In the instant when the sovereign withdrew to congeal another volley, Su, Yi summoned every reserve of his training and will. He invoked the fusion of his blade with the cosmic essence he called the universe heart, channeling a light both searing and sanctifying. The resulting strike was not merely force, but a purgative radiance that cleaved through gloom. It struck the sovereign as he strained, and the impact detonated into a thunderous rupture of sound and color. The Dark Lord recoiled, then dissolved into a plume of obsidian smoke. With his dissolution, the orb's corruptive intensity unspooled and began to dissipate. Seizing the chance, Su, Yi, and Lu Ruolai shattered the sphere. Its remnants imploded into motes of harmless light as the storm's ferocity subsided. Planetary trajectories steadied, the maelstrom's roar dwindled to a whisper. Life across the system began to breathe again. In the wake of the ordeal, Su, Yi, and Lu Ruolai charted a course into deeper space, their silhouettes small against the immensity of the heavens. The galaxy restored, but wary resumed its silent rotations. For now peace had been restored to one corner of the cosmos, a fragile victory earned by courage, insight, and the steadfast companionship of two souls who had chosen to defend the luminous balance of existence. The valiant exploits of Su, Yi, and Lu Ruolai in an uncharted stellar system unfurled like a brilliant beacon spreading hope across countless worlds. Yet they did not bask in praise. Both understood that cosmic peace remained precarious and that the shadow of malevolence had never fully receded. During a routine interstellar patrol, Su, Yi piloted their vessel with unwavering focus, his gaze fixed upon the oscillating instruments. Lu Ruolai sat at the co-pilot console, her fingers gliding over the stellar charts as she scrutinized energy fluctuations across the constellations. Suddenly the ship's alarm cried out, shattering the cabin's calm. The warning display revealed an anomalous and potent surge of dark energy emanating from the distant Xinyuan Xingja. Lu Ruolai frowned and spoke softly, observing that the disturbance was more intense than any they had encountered and seemed suffused with a primeval malignant essence. Su Yi nodded with resolute clarity and declared that they could not stand idle. They altered course, and the craft streaked toward Xinyuan Xingja like a silver bolt. During the long voyage, they queried the ship's archives and deployed advanced sensors, yet discovered only fragmentary lore about Xinyuan Xingja myth than record hints of unspeakable peril and hidden enigmas. As they approached, a palpable oppression descended. Before them loomed a vast black nebula veiling the entire domain, its inner mists pierced by eerie crimson lightning like innumerable infernal eyes. A twisted ring of warped space girded the nebula as if to bar all intruders. Su Yi guided the ship with meticulous care, striving to force a passage through the spatial barrier. The engines roared, contending with the manifold distortions. Lu Ruolai wove her spiritual energy into a protective aura around the vessel, and with an intimate understanding of spatial principles aided Su Yi in finding an opening. By dint of tenacious effort, they finally breached the outer veil and entered the desolate realm. No sooner had they penetrated the darkness than a swarm of nightmarish winged beings struck. These creatures resembled colossal bats. Their wings shimmered with a sinister violet luminescence, and they belched black flames rife with corrosive, shadowed power. Su Yi activated the ship's armaments, lasers and missiles converging in searing beams and detonations, while Lu Ruolai cast radiant spells that wove with the ship's strikes. Together they repelled the assault. Pressing deeper into the Xinyuan Xingja, they discovered a colossal black citadel. Towering walls of midnight stone exuded an icy, malignant aura, and a ring of vaporous dark fog shimmered with unsettling lights. When they landed at the gate, the great doors opened, and a phalanx of black guards surged forth. Clad in sable armor and wielding weapons saturated with dark energy, the sentinels were swift and remorseless. Su Yi drew his longsword and employed the ancient Yuxing Jianfa. The blade radiated prismatic light, and his sword, Qi, cleaved through the ranks. Lu Ruolai chanted and cast, sending cascades of golden magic to rend the shroud of fog and strike the guards. They learned by observation that the guards' armor was formidable yet vulnerable at the joints. Su Yi refined his strikes to pierce those weaknesses, while Lu Ruolai targeted helmets and backs, with focused spells loosening the defenders' cohesion. After arduous combat, they broke the encirclement and entered the castle's interior, where a fetid gloom reigned and walls were inlaid with black crystals that fed the fortress with corrupt energy. In the deepest chamber, they found the malignant ritual in progress. At the center of an enormous magic array stood the cult's leader, surrounded by cloaked figurists He, Pao Ren chanting and brandishing staves of shadow in an effort to awaken the sleeping Heian Imo Shun harbored within the sigil. The leader sneered at the intruders and unleashed torrents of dark sorcery. Meteoric shards of black light streaked towards Su Yi and Lu Ruolai. They conjured protective barriers and answered with sword and spell. The leader proved a formidable adversary. His sorcery convulsed the surrounding space with jolting force. Su Yi and Lu Ruolai fought in seamless tandem, Su Yi pushing the Yuxing Jianfa to its fullest, while Lu Ruolai shifted her incantations to both support and probe for an opening. Su Yi observed that each of the leader's spells required a moment of concentration, a cadence he exploited. At the brief instant when the enemy began to gather his power, Su Yi channeled the force of the Yuzhou Xian into his blade, and unleashed a transcendent stroke. A multi-hued sword chi of purifying light cleaved the dark conjurer, who was consumed in a thunderous eruption and dissolved into black smoke. Undaunted Su, he inhaled and marshaled every ounce of his spirit, amplifying the Yuzhou Ji Exine within him until his body was rimmed with prismatic radiance and his sword blazed with searing brilliance. Lu Ruolai concentrated her arcane might to its apogee, her hands effulgent with gilded light. The dark titan swung vast crushing limbs. Su Yi raised the defensive patterns of Yuxing Jianfa to forge a resolute sword chi bulwark, while Lu Ruolai infused it with golden spellcraft, strengthening their aegis against the cataclysmic blows. The entity's movements were stupendous, yet somewhat ponderous. Su Yi seized that measure and launched relentless assaults, each sword chi a razor of elemental force. Lu Ruolai intertwined a tapestry of complementary spells, piercing and prodding until fissures appeared across the creature's obsidian hide. From those rents streamed dark essence, but the colossus howled and strove to overwhelm them with raw might. They could not falter. Reaching the limits of endurance, Su Yi gathered the combined potency of Yuxing Jianfa and the Yuzhou Ji Exine into a singular absolute strike, while Lu Ruolai concentrated every remaining mode of sorcery into a convergent spell. Their attacks met at the entity's heart like twin comets of purifying luminosity. The dark form shrieked in a dolorous cry and fragmented into a dispersing shroud of shadow. The oppressive energy that had suffused the castle evaporated, and a trembling stillness fell over the Xinyuan Xingja. When silence reigned, Su Yi and Lu Ruolai stood weary but resolute. They had thwarted the resurrection of the Heian Mo Shun and preserved the realm from consummate ruin. Boarding their vessel, they cast a final glance back at the once forsaken territory, now breathing free of corruption. With intertwined determination, they resumed their course through the stars, pledged to safeguard the fragile harmony of the cosmos. Their deeds would ripple through time, inspiring future generations to seek the light and resist the encroaching dark. After Su Yi and Lu Ruolai foiled the malignant scheme of Xinyuan Xingja, the cosmos settled into a fragile peace. Yet the two guardians remained vigilant. They traversed the infinite firmament aboard their vessel, guardians of countless starfields, their vigilance unyielding as ever. In the ship's training chamber, Su Yi honed his art with a fierce, disciplined solitude. Clad in a sable combat suit, he stood erect as he whirled his long sword. The forces of the five elements surged through him, each stroke cleaving the air with audible intensity. Sweat traced determined lines down his resolute face, but his concentration never wavered. He strove to fuse the power of the Yuzhou's Hixin with the Yuxing Jianfa, each arc of steel infused with an unshakable resolve to preserve cosmic tranquility. Meanwhile, Lu Ruolai kept vigil in the observation bay, monitoring the subtle ripples of energy that threaded the void. Dressed in white that resembled fresh snow, her hair fell in a smooth curtain behind her as deft fingers danced across intricate consoles. Her gaze, keen and focused, watched the instruments until a violent fluctuation tore across the monitors. A mysterious surge of energy flared into view. The craft reoriented and sped toward the coordinates like a streak of silver. Throughout the long voyage, they probed the anomaly with every sensor available, yet the energy remained shrouded, resistant to analysis, as though cloaked by an invisible ward. As they closed in, an atmosphere of age and sorrow washed over them. Before their eyes drifted the wreckage of titanic warships and shattered planetary fragments, each casting a faint, mournful light. At the battlefield's heart hovered a vast black stele inscribed with enigmatic runes that emitted a disquieting luminescence. Their approach provoked intense interference. Instruments screamed, readouts flailed, and their defenses strained under a corrosive pressure. Lu Ruolai braided protective sigils around the ship while attempting to attenuate the interference with her understanding of cosmic currents. Su Yi gripped the controls with sweat beading at his brow, relying on iron will and consummate skill to steady their vessel. Amid the debris, a host of ephemeral phantoms drifted, shifting luminous visages that assumed menacing and incongruous forms. Their howls carried agony and rancor. Su Yi and Lu Ruolai discerned that these apparitions were tormented remnants of the battlefield's fallen. They endeavored first to ease the spirit's suffering. Approaching one of the phantoms, Su Yi offered succor, while Lu Ruolai opened a channel of communication. The spirits revealed they were ensnared, their souls unable to find rest. Resolute to liberate them, the pair pressed toward the stele at the center. The closer they drew, the fiercer the disruption. Their shields began to crack. At the stele, their inspection revealed ancient glyphs that spoke of a civilization that had once bound an overwhelming evil. The inscription named the sealed power Huimi Ji Yuan, a source capable of untold devastation should it be unsealed. The builders had surrounded the monument with complex defenses to prevent inadvertent release or deliberate tampering. No sooner had they resolved to reinforce the seal than a black mist erupted from the ruins, birthing nightmarish creatures. Some loomed like living mountains of shadow, others darted as sinuous streaks of darkness. Su Yi unleashed the Yuxing Jianfa, his blade of flame, with chromatic light that swept through the encroaching void. Lu Ruolai wove luminous incantations, her spells scattering the miasma. Though the foes seemed formidable, their movements betrayed an unnatural constraint, as if bound to an unseen mechanism. While fighting, Su Yi observed the creatures' patterns and deduced they answered to a control hidden within the battlefield. He and Lu Ruolai fought tactically, searching amid the stone and wreckage until a mysterious crystal was found embedded at the stell's base. It was circled by a ring of sigils that pulsed with command. Su Yi struck with a concentrated surge of sword energy and then rushed the crystal, channeling spirit power to shatter it. The crystal retaliated with violent backlash, but through sheer force of will and a ramping of his energy, Su Yi dimmed its glow and slowed the dark horde. Seizing the moment, Lu Ruolai cast a cascade of purifying spells that cleared the remaining shadows. In the stell's shadow, they discovered a concealed magic array, and at its center, a radiant purple gem suffused with potent energy. The inscription revealed the gem was integral to the seal over Huimi Ji Yuan. To strengthen the binding, they must reactivate and harmonize it with the other warding essences. As they neared the gem, a surge of abyssal force erupted, and a voice like rumbling stone denounced their presumption. From the purple core, a colossal dark form coalesced, very incarnation of Huimi Ji Yuan. Its tendrils lashed, seeking to crush them. Su Yi answered with a blade charged by the Yuzhou's Hixin, a strike born of cosmic order. Lu Ruolai unleashed every arcane stratagem she possessed, their lights entwining in fierce counterpoint. Yet the dark avatar drew strength from the battlefield's ambient corruption. Su Yi realized that to prevail they must sever the bond that amplified the monster. Between assaults, Su Yi searched for the nexus of the array and guided the flow of the Yuzhou's Hixin to disrupt a crucial link. Lu Ruolai kept the avatar engaged, yielding no ground. Their combined exertion culminated in the fracture of the energy node. The dark form lost coherence. Su Yi gathered the last reserves of his power and hewed a purifying sword wave that cleaved through the shadow. With a plaintive cry, the manifestation unraveled and dissolved. The purple gem stilled, and the seal reknit itself into a serene glow. Exhausted, Su Yi and Lu Ruolai sank to the scorched ground. They had averted a catastrophe and quieted the battlefield's anguished spirits. After a brief respite, they boarded their ship and departed, bound for the next vigil. They understood that the universe still harbored innumerable perils, but shoulder to shoulder, they were prepared to meet whatever darkness might rise. Su Yi piloted the ship into the heart of the assault like a streak of lightning, while Lu Ruolai brought the weapon systems to bear. Lasers and missiles braided through space, striking several black vessels with precise, devastating force. The enemy ships reoriented and retaliated with concentrated volleys. Under a hail of fire, Su Yi's deft maneuvering rendered the ship an elusive phantom. Lu Ruolai's focus turned every shot into a scalpel, finding each adversary's fracture point. Though they had driven back a portion of the invaders, both understood that the threat was not yet quelled. They descended to the main planet of Shingui Xingtuan and encountered a wounded sentinel whose complexion had been leached by fear. He murmured that the dark force sought the power hidden within the Shingui Yujith relic at the cluster's core, rumored to hold dominion over the cosmos. The sentinel, breath ragged, confirmed that the relic's locus lay at the very heart of the cluster. Approaching the core, a potent, unfathomable presence greeted them. Suspended amid the void, a vast ancient ruin radiated a warm golden light. Its surfaces were incised with cryptic runes that pulsed as if animated. A black roiling mist cloaked the relic, a smothering shroud that hid innumerable perils. Within the ruin, the air itself felt venerable, and solemn luminescent crystals set into the walls guided them along serpentine passageways. From the shadows surged sentinels of darkness, towering figures woven from black energy, exuding an unrelenting chill and bearing weapons that glinted with a malevolent cold. Su Yi drew his longsword and invoked the Yuxing Jianfa. The blade erupted in prismatic light, its arcs of force carving through the gloom. Lu Ruolai matched his fury with sorcery, forming rapid hand seals that birthed torrents of luminous incantation. Plain strikes dulled against the dark guardians, for their essence resonated with the mist itself. Su Yi and Lu Ruolai erected a shield of spirit to counter the assault. Su Yi wove the Yuxing Jianfa with the latent energies of ancient civilizations and the universe heart, driving a tempest of blade that surged against the leader. Lu Ruolai alternated between purifying light to sap the darkness and binding incantations to restrain his movements. The leader answered by summoning a horde of dark beasts which lunged with feral savagery. Su Yi's swordsmanship defended their lines while Lu Ruolai struck at the monster's vulnerabilities, each blow echoing like thunder through the hall. As the battle reached its crescendo, Su Yi noticed the leader needed to gather energy to unleash his most devastating magic. He and Lu Ruolai exchanged a wordless accord. Lu Rulai wove an illusion to fracture the leader's concentration. Su Yi channeled the fullest extent of his power into a single immaculate stroke. The sword's chi suffused with cosmic order, and purifying light streaked through the chamber like a falling star and struck the leader. With a scream that rent the dark around him, the figure dissolved into radiance. His summoned beasts evaporated in its wake. With the darkness dispelled, Su Yi and Lu Rulai approached the Xingyi Shuijing and secured it within a sanctified enclosure, ensuring it would continue to guard the cluster. Exiting the ruin, they watched Xingui Xingtuan breathe an unsteady calm back into its skies. Though aware that the shadow would not be extinguished forever, they found solace in the strength of their companionship and the steadfastness of their cause. Boarding their ship, they resumed their voyage across the stars, their tale destined to reverberate through the cosmos and inspire others to safeguard the light. After Su Yi and Lu Rulai had reinforced the seal upon Hundun Moiwan and contained the Hundun Moshin, the cosmos regained a fragile tranquility. Vigilant and unwilling to relax, they continued to pilot their vessel across the boundless firmament, patrolling the void to safeguard the hard-won peace. On an otherwise uneventful day, the ship cruised serenely between the stars. Su Yi sat in the cockpit, hands fluent over the controls, eyes flicking across fluctuating readouts. At the adjacent workbench, Lu Rulai examined newly gathered traces of cosmic flux, searching the spectral maps for any portent of danger. The ship altered its heading and streaked toward the origin furnace like a silver meteor. Throughout the voyage, they employed every instrument aboard to parse the anomaly's provenance and nature, only to find their efforts thwarted by an invisible veil that swallowed signals and rendered their probes mute. As they approached, an ancient and overpowering presence washed over them. Suspended in the void was a colossal furnace, its surface aflame with shifting prismatic light. Runes and inscrutable patterns etched across its skin shimmered, as if recounting the genesis of the cosmos. Concentric halos of energy swirled around it, their turbulent currents colliding and singing with thunderous intensity. When the ship attempted to close the distance, a violent repulsive force flung it into tumult. Alarms screamed and instruments danced with frantic readings. Lu Rulai summoned her Lingli, conjuring a resilient protective field about the hull, while she manipulated ambient energies to blunt the push. Su Yi gripped the yoke, sweat beading upon his brow, and with unyielding will and masterful piloting, he steadied their craft. Su Yi unleashed his Yuxing Jianfa, the blade, singing with polychromatic light, as arcs of sword chi rent the air. Lu Rulai chanted incantations in rapid succession, dispatching radiant torrents of spellcraft to illuminate and bind the gloom. The shadow answered with a furious roar, a shockwave that swept toward them and threatened to sunder their defenses. They braced behind their wards as the shadow hurled massive obsidian limbs. Su Yi formed a concussive sword barrier, while Lu Rulai suffused it with golden luminescence, augmenting its resilience. Each strike shook them to their cores, yet they held fast. Their gambit succeeded when the node ruptured. The dark presence shrieked and faltered. Seizing the breach, Su Yi fused the radiance of Yuzhou's Hixin with his final transcendent stroke of Yuxing Jianfa. A prismatic blade of purifying light tore through the void. Lu Rulai converged her greatest spell upon the same point, their powers aligning in a single cleansing crescendo. The combined assault consumed the shadow. Light inundated the core, and the black mist evaporated. The malignant current ebbed, and the furnace's balances reknitted themselves. Kiwan wrongless multi-hued glow returned, the runes burning brighter as equilibrium was restored. The Showery gathered to offer thanks and held a celebration to honor their saviors. Su Yi and Lu Rulai departed Kiwan Ronglu beneath a sky that seemed at first glance undisturbed. Yet the calm was deceptive, a vigilant unease clung to them. Aboard their slender vessel, Su Yi maintained a steady vigil over the navigation array, fingers deftly adjusting course corrections with deliberate precision. Beside him, Lu Rulai scrutinized the ship's energy shields, her gaze meticulous as she absently coaxed a stray lock of hair behind her ear, mindful of the subtle vibrations in the hull that bespoke more than mere mechanical strain. Without warning, the emergency siren cut through the cabin, urgent and metallic. The console bloomed crimson, revealing anomalous oscillations emanating from Enying Xingtuan. The disturbance bore an irregular cadence and a malign undertone that set both hearts racing. Lu Ruli's brow furrowed with concern. She declared that such signatures did not comport with any natural phenomenon and insisted that the star cluster must be in grave disorder. Su Yi met her resolve with equal gravity and steered the ship toward the source. They accelerated into the black, committing themselves to confrontation rather than retreat. As they closed on Enying Xingtuan, the databases yielded only superstition and fragments of lore, an unsettling testament to the cluster's erasure from reliable record. A viscous darkness enshrouded the stars, threaded with lurid dark-red lightning that flashed like the watchful eyes of some unseen predator. Planetary silhouettes warped under an invisible hand, familiar contours blurred, and the light they emitted was drained to a hollow, uncanny glow. A oppressive weight descended upon the ship as if the very fabric of space resisted their intrusion. The vessel's forward momentum faltered upon contact with that black mist. Engines roared against an invisible drag, while control surfaces shuddered. Lurulai poured her spiritual energy outward, forming a tenacious protective barrier that hugged the hull simultaneously. She guided subtle currents of cosmic understanding to undermine the malign fog. Su-Yi wrestled the controls with ferocious focus, sweat beading on his brow as he navigated through the obstruction. Their combined resolve finally cleaved a passage into the cluster's interior. After a brutal engagement, the shadow forms dispersed. Pressing deeper, the pair discovered a colossal black citadel, suspended above a desolate world, its battlements etched with occult sigils that glowed a malevolent dark crimson. They touched down beneath the fortress where a phalanx of shadow sentinels in black armor erupted from the gate. Towering and implacable, they bore weapons wreathed in void energy and advanced with merciless precision. Su-Yi drew his sword and unfolded the techniques of Yuxing Jianfa, each stroke flaring with prismatic light as sword chi braided through the ranks of the guards. Lurulai unleashed resplendent spells that illuminated the ramparts and struck devastatingly at the enemy. From the umbral depths, a voice hollow and triumphant intoned contempt. A cloaked figure revealed himself, his visage masked in grotesque iron eyes burning with avarice. He proclaimed his intent to seize the Xin and ascend to dominion over the cosmos. He brandished a staff, and torrents of blackened sorcery erupted like meteors. Su-Yi and Lurulai erected shields deflecting the onslaught, but they soon discerned that the cloaked one's power was fed by the gem itself. Each spell drew nourishment from the pulsating heart. Realizing that the artifact was the wellspring of his strength, they resolved to deny him that advantage. At the decisive instant, Su-Yi poured the totality of his cultivated power into a single stroke, merging the cosmic order of Yuzhou Xin with the purifying force of Yuxing Jianfa. A lance of radiance suffused with certainty and cleansing might cleave the chamber. It struck the Xin, and the resulting cataclysmic implosion shattered the gem into motes of dissipating shadow. The cloaked figure let out a sound like sundered thunder and unraveled into nothing beneath the cleansing light. With the artifact undone, the citadel's malignant aura receded, and the star cluster's corruptive grip loosened. Su-Yi and Lurulai emerged from the fortress scarred but triumphant. They boarded their vessel and left Xingtuan behind, casting a long look at the despoiled cluster as the engines bore them into clearer space. In the silence of the cabin, they reflected on the breadth of the threats that yet awaited the cosmos. They understood that countless perils would demand their vigil, yet together they possessed the resolve to confront whatever darkness might rise. Their deed would ripple outward as a tale of guardianship, inspiring those who sought light to continue standing watch for the serenity of the universe. Adrift in the boundless cosmos, Su-Yi and Lurulai navigated their vessel like vigilant sentinels threading the vast firmament to safeguard cosmic tranquility. Fresh from a violent skirmish with interstellar marauders, their ship still bore the scars of combat. Su-Yi sat in the cockpit, deftly engaging repair protocols while his gaze meticulously assessed structural damage. Lurulai tended their armaments at his side, preparing for whatever peril might next arise. An abrupt emergency alarm shattered the cabin's quiet, its shrill cry snapping both of them to alertness. The console flared red, revealing an anomalous potent energy fluctuation emanating from the distant Huanmengxing. Lurulai's brows knitted with apprehension. The disturbance carried an otherworldly, dreamlike cadence that bespoke calamity. Su-Yi's expression hardened. Without hesitation, he said they must depart at once, for such a perturbation might herald a threat to the wider universe. Their craft streaked like a silver bolt toward Huanmengxing. During the long transit, they scoured the ship's databanks and probed the phenomenon with every sensor, but the energy seemed shrouded by an intangible veil. Every attempt to decipher it dissolved into nothing, as though their instruments were trying to grasp light through mist. Su-Yi steered cautiously, but the vessel was immediately assailed by violent gravitational tugs and spatial turbulence that shook the hull and sent instruments into frantic alarms. Lurulai poured forth spiritual energy to erect a resilient protective barrier around the ship and employed her understanding of spatial laws to soothe the local chronospatial eddies. Su-Yi gripped the controls, sweat beading at his brow, and through sheer will and consummate skill, he stabilized their craft long enough to breach the maelstrom. Together, they managed a fraught descent onto a peculiar world at the river's edge. Stepping onto that alien soil, they were bathed in shifting luminescence. The environs mutated like a waking dream. Every step required caution, lest some hidden peril be triggered. At the threshold of the Starriver, radiant constellations arranged themselves into vivid tableaus, familiar memories, and unreal fantasies entwined temptations that nearly ensnared Lurulai. Su-Yi, sensing her falter, gripped her arm, and invoked the power of Yuzhou Xian to steady her mind, warning that these visions sought to invade their consciousness. No sooner had he spoken than ethereal beings of light surged forth from the stars. These Huanmeng creatures were insubstantial flowing clusters of luminance, some bearing the grace of celestial maidens, others the ferocity of spectral beasts, each emission carrying an intoxicating, disorienting cry. Su Yi drew his blade and unleashed the Yuxing Jianfa, a cascade of prismatic sword qi that braided across the void and repelled the oncoming phantoms. Lu Ruolai countered with incantations, weaving brilliant spells whose radiance smote the apparitions and clarified their surroundings. Attuning his consciousness to the river's currents, Su Yi harmonized the energies to his will, and the connections began to rupture. The entity thrashed wildly, unleashing torrents of oppressive visions that buffeted Lu Ruoli's defenses to the brink. Gritting her teeth, she held the line until Su Yi summoned a final convergent, streaking, incandescent lance of order, purification, and cosmic luminescence met at its apex by Lu Ruoli's ultimate incantation. Their combined force struck the core. Huanmeng Zishui shrieked and dissolved as it faded. The spectral tides collapsed, and the river's lights returned to their natural cadence. Space and time reknit themselves, and tranquility was restored. With the crisis averted, Su Yi and Lu Ruolai surveyed the river to ensure no remnant peril remained. Comforted, they reboarded their vessel and resumed their voyage among the stars. They knew the universe still held countless threats, yet their steadfast partnership and devotion to preserving peace would carry them onward. Their deeds would ripple through the cosmos, inspiring successive generations to pursue the light and guard the fragile harmony of all things. Aboard their vessel, Su Yi and Lu Ruolai drifted through the dark between stars, the aftertaste of battle lingering like ozone. The cabin retained an edge of taut silence. Su Yi sat at the helm, fingers sure and methodical, as he inspected instruments and calibrated systems to optimal precision. Beside him, Lu Ruolai cataloged the energy samples scavenged from Huanmeng, Xing, her brow furrowed in concentration as she sought patterns and omens that might presage future perils. The peace fractured as the ship's alarm cried out a keen, unrelenting note. Both turned to the display, where a raw, anomalous fluctuation pulsed across the starscape, emanating from the distant locus known as Shangyan Kidian. Lu Ruoli's expression hardened. She spoke with grave restraint, sensing a disorder that smelled of entropy itself. Su Yi met her gaze with quiet resolve and declared that whatever awaited them could imperil the cosmos, and they must answer without delay. They accelerated like a silver meteor toward the disturbance. En route, their vessel probed the strange energy with every available sensor, but the anomaly lay behind a veil of chaotic interference. Readouts spun into incomprehension as if swallowed by a maelstrom. Only the ship's core detectors betrayed the energy's malign potency, each oscillation resonant with the impression of the universe in pain. Su Yi piloted with extreme caution, but the vessel immediately endured torrents of gravitational shear and energetic turbulence. Alarms screamed as instruments quivered and metrics jittered into meaninglessness. Lu Ruolai wove a resilient protective field with her spiritual power and applied her nuanced understanding of cosmological law to temper the surrounding distortion. Su Yi gripped the controls with iron will, his mastery of piloting and stamina the slender hinge upon which their survival turned. They forced a brutal descent to a desolate world near the singularity. A wind like a blade cut the exposed air as they disembarked into a landscape scarred by fissures that exhaled molten rock and errant streams of raw energy. The sky shimmered with spatial aberration, streaks that testified to time itself being contorted. Each step toward the epicenter required caution, for the ground and the air were treacherous with hidden ruptures. Observing carefully, Su Yi discerned a minute prelude to each assault, a subtle coalescence of energy within the creatures that presaged their lunge. He exploited this moment, channeling the power of Yuzhou Xian into a concentrated sword qi to strike as the beasts gathered themselves. Lu Ruoli's complementary sorceries disrupted the creatures' communion with the ambient chaos, and through synchronized technique, they gradually turned the tide, driving the aberrations back. Deeper still, they discovered a roiling vortex studded with shifting runes and patterns that seemed to narrate the paradox of creation and annihilation. The vortex linked directly to Shangyan Kidian. As they probed its structure, a colossal avatar of entropy materialized, a demigod wrought from the same malignant flux. Its roar unmade the air itself, and its massive limbs battered their defenses. Su Yi and Lu Ruolai resolved to fight and to stabilize the vortex simultaneously. Identifying several pivotal energy nodes in the whirl, Su Yi focused Yuzhou Xian to shepherd the flows while Lu Ruolai restrained the abomination. Their gambit drew the demon's wrath, and the battle became a desperate counterpoint of preservation and assault. Through relentless concentration and sacrifice, Su Yi succeeded in steadying one key node. The entity convulsed as its loosed strength waned. Seizing the instant, Su Yi unleashed a culminating stroke that melded the five elements blade art with the ordered force of Yuzhou Jixian. Lu Ruolai deposited the fullness of her power into the strike, forging a convergence of sword and spell. Light engulfed the entropy god, the vortex's sigils calmed the singularity's tumult abated, and the fabric of space and time began a begrudging recovery. Breath returned to shattered orbits, and the immediate danger receded. Exhausted but gratified, Su Yi and Lu Ruolai surveyed the placated region and meticulously scoured the area for lingering anomalies before reboarding their craft. They launched once more into the starry expanse, aware that countless other threats drifted in the vastness. Yet as long as they stood united, their conviction to safeguard the cosmos would endure, and their deeds would echo through the void, inspiring successive generations to pursue light and preserve the fragile order of the universe. As their vessel glided away from the Shangbian Kidian, the maelstrom of disorder receded until only a faint memory remained. The cosmos resumed its placid facade, yet both Su Yi and Lu Ruolai understood that this fragile calm was but a prelude to greater tempests. In the cockpit, they sat opposite one another, faces marked by the fatigue of combat, yet eyes alight with resolute purpose. Lu Ruolai exhaled softly and observed that although the immediate peril had been quelled, the universe still harbored innumerable enigmas awaiting discovery. Su Yi inclined his head and gaze fixed on the distant void, admitted he had sensed a formidable power during their Ordalan influence that seemed entwined with the origins and destiny of the cosmos itself. One mission brought them to a planet ensheathed in an impenetrable energy dome. Instruments could not penetrate the shield, so Su Yi and Lu Ruolai approached with utmost caution. No sooner had they probed the perimeter than a host of metallic beings burst forth. Their forms were wrought of an unfamiliar alloy and radiated a glacial aura. They attacked without hesitation, relentless, precise, and impervious to ordinary assaults. Su Yi drew his blade and invoked the Wuxing Jianfa. The sword shimmered with prismatic light as waves of cutting qi braided through space. Lu Ruolai chanted arcane formulas, her hands weaving luminous spells that cleaved the darkness. Yet the automatons answered with concentrated energy beams whose force threatened to overwhelm them. Enlightened by the robot's testimony, they probed the Nungliang Shuijing's architecture, and through a combination of ingenuity and the subtle guidance of Yuzhou Jixian's lingering harmonics, unraveled portions of its secret. The knowledge they gleaned imparted clues about the nature of the cosmic heart and the consequences of its misuse. With new data encoded into their instruments, they resumed their course toward the universe's periphery. Weeks of navigation and study followed, during which they cross-referenced discoveries and refined hypotheses until the coordinates of the Yuzhou Bianyuan's threshold revealed themselves. The gateway at the edge of creation was guarded by a formidable energy barrier. All conventional means of breach proved ineffective until Su Yi and Lu Ruolai employed a synthesis of shipboard technology and the subtle energies they had learned to coax from the Yuzhou Jixian. The barrier yielded in a cascade of scintillating fractures, and beyond it the fabric of reality itself seemed to contort. Space folded upon space-time shivered, and streams of iridescent power wove through vistas impossible to map. Anchored in that churning expanse lay a monolithic object suffused with raw influence, undoubtedly the Yuzhou Jixian. They accepted the burden with quiet solemnity, their hearts furnished now with clarity and resolve. Emerging from the Bianyuan, they returned to their vessel beneath an expanse of stars that seemed at once more intimate and more immense. Their faces bore the calm of those who have touched a profound responsibility, their spirits brimmed with anticipation for the trials yet to come. Theirs was not a tale of final triumph, but the commencement of an arduous guardianship. Together they would traverse the cosmos, protect its delicate peace, and pursue the luminous truth hidden within the Yuzhou Jixian, their deeds destined to inspire successive generations to seek illumination and safeguard the serenity of the universe. Their ship slid into the star-strewn dark, a small beacon against the infinite. Su Yi and Lu Ruolai sat side by side, neither naive nor unburdened, but united by a conviction that shone brighter than any distant sun. Whatever storms waited beyond the horizon, they would confront them as custodians of a fragile order, forever attentive to the whispers of the cosmos and the secret heart that beat at its center. Su Yi and Lu Ruolai departed the fringe of the cosmos aboard their starcraft, bearing the cryptic revelations bestowed by the Yuzhou Jixian. The tremors of that primordial power still echoed within their souls, instilling in them a deeper, weightier comprehension of the mission that lay ahead. As the vessel threaded through the abyss, an austere silence settled within the cabin. Both were ensnared in contemplation of the visions the Yuzhou Jixian had unveiled. Breaking the hush, Su Yi spoke with measured intensity, his fingers tapping the console as though to punctuate his thought. He confessed that the images the Yuzhou Jixian had shown them felt incomplete, as if a latent significance had been deliberately withheld. Lu Ruolai, gazing outward at the infinite sprawl of stars, agreed that they had glimpsed only the visage of things, not the concealed nucleus that governed them. As Sui piloted closer, the craft encountered a tangible pressure that pressed upon them like a physical hand. Propulsion faltered beneath an oppressive interference. The engines emitted a sonorous, laboring tone as they resisted the unknown force. Lu Ruolai concentrated, weaving a denser lattice of spiritual defense around the ship, while probing the energy with her perception. Yet whenever her senses grazed the boundary of that region, the information unraveled like a labyrinth whose corridors dissolved in an instant. Upon entry, the panorama transformed into an otherworldly ballet of lights. Countless luminous filaments danced and spiraled, shifting color and geometry as if articulating a secret choreography of the cosmos. Amid that iridescent weave, faint silhouettes loomed, vast and indistinct, their contours suggesting gargantuan entities formed of pure energy rather than flesh. A sudden blinding beam streaked toward them, prompting an immediate evasive maneuver. The light scorched past the hull, producing a high keening shriek. Sui readied his blade. Its edge shimmered with prismatic radiance, while Lu Ruolai shaped her hands into sigils of invocation. Then, as if summoned by their response, an ancient resonant voice filled their minds and demanded the purpose of their intrusion. The shower of show attacked with primordial ferocity. Sui manifested a defensive array drawn from the Yuxing Jianfa, forging an adamantine barrier of sword chi before him. Lu Ruolai suffused that barrier with her spiritual nexus, amplifying its resilience. Each impact rang like thunder, and successive strikes tested the limits of their endurance as the Guardians varied their tactics with unsettling fluidity. Amid the barrage, Lu Ruolai discerned a subtle, recurring modulation in the Guardians' energy signature, an almost imperceptible prelude that heralded each assault. She relayed the observation to Sui, who adjusted their timing and countermeasures accordingly. With anticipation now aligning their defenses, they weathered the onslaught with increasing composure. As the incense's final ember descended, the Guardians' fury abated, and their forms dissolved, yielding to a soft, abating luminance. The ancient voice acknowledged their success. In the quiet that followed, a monumental stele materialized before them, its surface inscribed with arcane glyphs and patterns that pulsed faintly, as though narrating the cosmos' elder chronicle. They approached the monolith with reverence, yet found its inscriptions impenetrable through ordinary means. Recalling the communion bestowed by the Yuzhou Ji Xian, Sui concentrated and re-established that subtle linkage. Through the bond, fragments of meaning unfurled, transforming undecipherable runes into intelligible threads. With renewed collaboration, the two of them parsed the tablet's revelations. As they carefully extricated the crystal, a malignant shadow convulsed the air. From that darkness erupted a monstrous entity, its visage corrupted by noir energies that twisted the surrounding space. Their assaults at first barely scarred it. The beast absorbed ambient darkness and reconstituted itself with alarming rapidity. Only when Lu Ruolai unleashed the crystal's purifying essence did the creature falter, and in concert with Sui's culminating streaking amalgam of Yuxing Jianfa and Yuzhou Ji's infused blade, they finally dissolved the abomination into a blinding cascade of light. Attuning themselves to that guidance, Sui located the star's vector. Buoyed by renewed purpose, they plotted a direct course toward the Qiwan Jixing. They understood that the path ahead would demand sacrifices, and that trials yet more arduous awaited, but their determination to restore cosmic balance steeled them. Thus they sped into the interstellar night, their odyssey continuing as an incipient legend destined to inspire innumerable lives to safeguard the serenity of the universe. Sui and Lu Ruolai piloted their vessel through the vast tapestry of stars, the engines emitting a steady sonorous hum that cleaved the silence of the void. Sui sat at the helm with measured hands on the controls, his gaze intent upon the navigation array where an intricate star chart and streaming coordinates guided their course toward the enigmatic Qiwan's Jixing. Beside him, Lu Ruolai cradled an ancient interstellar codex, leafing through its worn pages in search of lore and omen that might illuminate the mysteries surrounding Hundun Maiwu. Lu Ruolai spoke with a note of concern, recounting the codex's warnings that vessels and life forms that entered Hundun Maiwu seldom emerged. Sui's brow tightened, but his voice betrayed resolve. Whatever perils lay ahead, the summons of the Yuzhou's Jixin compelled them forward. They had endured much already. Fear, he suggested, would be an indulgence they could not afford. A faint smile eased Lu Ruolai's worry as they pressed deeper into the cosmos. As they approached their destination, the stellar density thinned, and the void became rife with drifting interstellar dust and violent eddies of raw energy. Turbulent currents battered the ship like ocean swells, and each evasive maneuver demanded precision. Sweat beaded on Sui's forehead as he threaded the craft through the turbulence. Lu Ruolai wove her lingly into a silent halo, erecting a fragile shield about the vessel to absorb the shocks, their efforts synchronized by trust as much as by technique. Inside the cloud, the atmosphere became an oppressive mosaic of clashing energies. Navigation arrays and sensors failed, their signals drowned in the cacophony of chaotic flux. They had to trust instinct and the subtle currents of Lingli. Lu Ruolai closed her eyes, attempting to perceive the presence of Kiwan's Hixing, but the mist's interference shattered every avenue of clarity. At a critical moment, Su Yi felt the Yuzhou's Hixin's guidance flutter within him and steered toward that whispering tug deeper into the labyrinth. The scene transformed into a surreal landscape of hovering energy crystals and drifting life forms forged of pure light. Suddenly, an immense entity surged forth, an octopus of living energy whose undulating tentacles crackled with volatile power. The creature struck with terrifying speed, its limbs grazing the hull with shrill friction. Su Yi piloted evasive arcs while Lu Ruolai unleashed a concentrated beam of Lingli. The combat was swift and brutal. Together, they repelled the creature, learning that the denizens of Hundun Maiwu were fiercely hostile to intruders. With the blackness dispersed, Kiwan's Hixing regained its radiant clarity. The Nongliang Jijing and the star's energy intertwined, inscriptions and sigils blossoming across the crystal's surface as the artifact absorbed the star's essence. They had secured the crucial power needed to mend the Yuzhou's Hixin. Exhausted but elated, Su Yi and Lu Ruolai set a course homeward, unaware that unseen eyes in the black beyond watched their departure, foreshadowing a deeper threat that lingered in the void. Su Yi and Lu Ruolai steered their battered vessel through the star-strewn void, a crystalline shard suffused with the energy of the Kiwan Jixing secured within a bespoke containment chamber. Nebulae, once tumultuous and alive with chaotic mists, dwindled behind them to specks of color and then disappeared into the indifferent black. Exhaustion marked their faces, yet within their eyes burned an irrepressible expectancy. The crystal's faint pulse seemed to speak of mending a wound that had long festered at the heart of the cosmos. Su Yi remained at the helm, stealing furtive glances at the imprisoned light. Each glimmer promised the restoration of the Yuzhou Xian and the salvation of untold worlds. Beside him, Lu Ruolai catalogued their ordeal with careful fingers, tracing ancient inscriptions in her memory as much as on the pages before her. Her thoughts lingered on the fierce encounters they had endured, the echo of recent battles still vivid in her pulse. Their conversation was soft, threaded with resolve. Lu Ruolai lifted her gaze and said that should they succeed in repairing the Yuzhou Xian, peace might be coaxed back into the universe. Su Yi allowed himself a small, weary smile and reminded her that vigilance must accompany hope. The prize they carried was precious and precarious. They kept their voices low against the vastness, as if not to wake some sleeping danger. As they drew nearer to the coordinates of the Yuzhou Xian, a peculiar hush settled over the star lanes. Other craft that had once traced these routes were conspicuously absent, and an uneasy stillness gathered like a shadow. Su Yi instinctively tightened his grip on the controls and tuned his senses. Lu Ruolai mirrored his concern, halting her work to exchange a look that spoke of shared apprehension. They raised their alertness and prepared for the unexpected. The attackers encircled them with swift, disciplined coordination. Su Yi met the aggression with blades of light, invoking Yuxing Jianfa. His sword sent arcs of elemental fury across space, dispersing several assailants. Lu Ruolai conjured conflagrations and streaks of lightning that tore through the void, and for a fleeting span their combined ferocity repelled the first tide. Yet the enemy adapted. Larger ships advanced with protruding collectors intent on siphoning the energy within their hold, and a corrosive blackness in the assailants' onslaught began to gnaw at the integrity of their Lingli defenses. When a colossal flagship detached from the phalanx and loomed before them, its hull inscribed with forbidding sigils, the battle escalated. Su Yi recognized its aura as something far older and more virulent than previous foes. He drew upon a deeper well, the power that bound him to the Yuzhou Xian, and performed Yuxing Giai. The elements converged upon his blade in a single devastating synthesis. The clash between his sword's unified might and the flagship's malignant pylons shook the void itself, threatening to rend their own vessel with the recoil. Lu Ruolai poured her Lingli into their faltering shield and unleashed a barrage of precise magics against the flagship's ramparts. Under the tandem onslaught, the enemy's defenses splintered and the flagship ruptured in a cataclysm that scattered the remaining attackers like brittle dust. Scorched but unbowed, they limped onward toward the Yuzhou Xian. The heart of the cosmos hovered at the center of that region, a suspended luminescence ringed by runes and eddies of raw power. But its radiance was marred by fissures. The glow had dimmed, and the artifact shivered like a wounded titan. Su Yi and Lu Ruolai approached with reverence. The containment eased, the crystal met the heart, and for an instant a harmonious vibration coursed outward as energies interwove. Light flared as the fissures began to knit, and hope swelled in their chests. Cutting a path through desperate opposition, Su Yi reached into the sanctum and found a towering black crystal throbbing with corrupt light, its filaments branching like parasitic veins into the fortress. He struck with the combined might of his blade and the resonance of the Yuzhou Gxin. The final blow shattered the dark crystal into glittering ruin. Instantly, the dark strands evaporated. The warriors staggered, as if awakening from a fever. Confusion and dawning clarity swept their faces. The immediate threat had been quelled, and the second crystal now lay within reach. Its brilliance and answered summons to the task that still awaited them. When the warriors in black armor regained consciousness, they stared about them in bewilderment, their weapons slackening at their sides. The leader slowly removed his helmet, revealing a face etched with confusion and contrition as he looked towards Su Yi and Lu Ruolai and asked, bewildered, what had transpired. Su Yi sheathed his long sword and stepped forward, explaining that a malignant darkness had been manipulating them and that they had just destroyed its source. The soldiers exchanged stunned looks. They retained no memory of the frenzied assault, only the hazy recollection of being driven into unconscious combat. Lu Ruolai approached with a gentle mien and spoke with earnestness, assuring them that neither she nor Su Yi bore ill intent. She disclosed that the Yuzhou Gxin had fallen into peril and that the two energy crystals were indispensable for its restoration, a matter that affected the fate of the entire cosmos. Gradually, the hostility in the soldiers' eyes dissipated. The leader inclined his head and yielded the crystal they had guarded for generations, acknowledging that its true purpose had been unknown until now. Gratitude and relief mingled on Su Yi and Lu Ruolai's faces as they placed the crystals together in a bespoke container. The pair resonated and glowed more brilliantly, as if eager to unlock an ancient seal. No sooner had they prepared to depart than the fortress shuddered with a violent tremor. From the windows, Su Yi and Lu Ruolai beheld an armada of vast vessels converging at high velocity, each craft suffused with an oppressive aura of darkness far more potent than anything they had yet encountered. Alarm tightened Su Yi's expression as he realized the enemy had sensed the disturbance emitting from the crystals and sought to seize them. The warriors straightened, weapons gripped anew by duty. The leader declared with resolve that what they had sworn to protect must not fall into the hands of darkness. A rapid defensive strategy was formed. The visitors tethered their ship within the fortress, integrating its defenses with the fortification systems. Lu Ruolai wove a spiritual shield around the ramparts that layered atop the fortress energy barrier, enhancing its resilience. Su Yi and the Guardians manned the weapons, unleashing salvo after salvo as the dark fleet fanned out and encircled them like a deadly crescent. A colossal command vessel detached itself from the formation, its hull inscribed with sinister runes, and a cold, merciless voice demanded the crystal's surrender on pain of annihilation. Hostilities erupted. Black beams rained upon the fortress as its shields quivered and flared under the onslaught. Su Yi and the defenders responded in kind, cannons and energy batteries striking several attackers and unleashing explosions that momentarily scattered the enemy ranks. Lu Ruolai concentrated on sustaining and reinforcing the shields, carefully gauging the assault's cadence. As the intensity mounted and the barrier strained, she warned Su Yi that their defenses would not endure forever, prompting him to conceive a bold stratagem. Su Yi proposed a surgical strike upon the command ship, reasoning that its destruction would collapse the Dark Fleet's coordination. With Lu Ruolai committed to maintaining the shields, he slipped through the melee like a phantom, his blade a streak of cold light. Employing the 5 elements blade techniques, he wove elemental currents about his sword to repel pursuers and cleave through enemy lines. Though the command vessel erected volatile energy bulwarks, Su Yi identified the energy core mounted beneath its hull as the pivotal vulnerability and steered his assault toward it. A smaller enemy ship intercepted him and hurled Su Yi aside, leaving him battered but unbowed on the deck of a hostile cruiser. Just as overwhelming strikes threatened to end him, a radiant spell from the fortress surmounted the battlefield and nullified the incoming blows. Lu Ruolai arrived at his side, and without pause the two combined their might to assail the command ship's core. Their energies fused, sword chi and spiritual power intermingled and struck with cataclysmic force. The core erupted in a cataclysm that sent the command vessel adrift and induced pandemonium among the remaining attackers, whose formation collapsed under coordinated counterfire. After a fierce engagement, the Dark Armada was repelled, their ships retreating in disarray. Exhausted yet triumphant, Su Yi, Lu Ruolai, and the fortress warriors surveyed the wreckage with solemn gratitude for survival. Brief rest was taken and thanks exchanged. Still, the travelers understood that retrieving the relic's entrance was merely the first passage of a greater odyssey. They resumed their voyage, studying the 2 energy crystals as they traveled toward the mysterious site. Lu Ruolai discerned arcane glyphs etched upon each crystal, resonances that mirrored notations from ancient tomes about a particular energy fluctuation. Their combined assault culminated in a brilliant finale. Su Yi called upon the Yuzhou Gxin's power in his blade, and Lu Ruolai unleashed her most potent incantation. Their energies converged and pierced the Guardian's belly. The beast collapsed with a thunderous cry, and the path to the altar cleared. When Su-yi lifted the relic from its pedestal, a warm, potent force suffused him. As they made their exit, the cavern began to fracture and tumble, forcing a desperate flight. They escaped mere moments before the ruin imploded, carrying the artifact into open space. In the tranquil era that followed the restoration of Yuzhou Xian, Su-yi and Lu Ruolai became living emblems of cosmic peace. Wherever they traveled, denizens of countless worlds greeted them with reverence. Yet praise did not soften their resolve. They understood that beneath a placid sky the universe could still conceal new perils. Su-yi leaned forward, eyes narrowing with purpose as he requested the signal's coordinates. The chief summoned the data and pointed to a pulsing point on the display, a region long and shrouded in mystery. The signal's emergence had sowed discomfort among the observatory staff. Exchanging a knowing look, Su-yi and Lu Ruolai recognized the portent of another challenge. After bidding farewell to AI zealous leaders, they retreated to their vessel to study the gathered information. Lu Ruolai consulted ancient tomes, while Su-yi set the course. Their conclusions suggested a connection to an archaic force, a hidden secret of the cosmos that might be stirring once more. During the voyage toward the cosmic edge, they refined their preparations. Su-yi augmented their ship's defenses and integrated the Wuxing Jianfa with the vessel's attack systems to magnify its offensive capacity. Lu Ruolai delved into the synthesis of spells, layering disparate elemental magics to forge more potent hybrid incantations. As they neared the mysterious zone, the environment grew hostile. The once stable cosmic magnetic fields became turbulent, navigation and communications faltered under violent interference. Su-yi gripped the controls with unyielding focus, steering through energy vortices, while Lu Ruolai stabilized the ship's systems with her practiced Lingli. They arrived into a realm wreathed in a faint violet haze where strange lights shimmered like emblems of a dream. Yet beauty concealed danger. Scanning beams detected a massive metallic sphere racing from the mist, its surface etched with unfamiliar sigils and thrumming with potent energy. It unleashed swift energy beams upon their craft. A fierce engagement ensued. Su-yi maneuvered with precision, returning fire with laser volleys while the sphere countered with disruptive waves that scrambled their electronics. Lu Ruolai channeled Lingli to repair failing systems and to bolster their defensive matrix. Observing the sphere's attack patterns, Su-yi discerned a rhythm and prepared a decisive strike. Seizing an interval between assaults, Su-yi unleashed the Wuxing Jianfa's decisive technique, sending a titanic sword chi from their ship. Lu Ruolai intertwined her most powerful multi-attribute spell with that blade of light. The combined onslaught struck true, detonating the sphere into fragments that dissolved into the violet fog. Before relief could settle, a swarm of smaller spheres surged from the haze, encircling the ship in an overwhelming tide. Individually less formidable than their predecessor, they compensated with relentless numbers. Su-yi and Lu Ruolai fought back, Su-yi cleaving the nearer drones with slicing sword chi, while Lu Ruolai cast layered protections about the ship, but attrition eroded their shields. When defeat loomed, Su-yi remembered the Shao Shinkai acquired in an ancient ruin. He wielded it and poured Lingli into the relic. It blossomed in a cleansing radiance, erecting an immense energy dome that immobilized and suppressed the metallic swarm. With the adversary slowed, the pair launched a systematic counterassault and annihilated the remaining drones. Inside the cavernous interior, luminous gems set into the walls cast an otherworldly glow. In the center floated an enormous stone dais supporting a book that shimmered with golden light. Its cover was locked in runes. Lu Ruolai decoded them and found the text recorded origins of the cosmos and the history of an ancient malignant force long bound at the universe's edge. The ruin itself formed part of the old seal. They understood the earlier spheres as fragments unleashed when the seal weakened. The escalating signal was the malefic power's attempt to breach its bonds. As they pondered their response, tremors ran through the ruin. Stone-fractured energies spiked, and from the depths the seal's slumbering menace began to stir. Shadows burst forth, grotesque shapes of corruption aflame with black fire. These entities consumed and corrupted all they touched. Su-yi called upon his sword arts, while Lu Ruolai summoned torrents of spiritual light. The adversaries seemed to feed upon darkness, growing stronger with each shadow absorbed, which revealed that brute force alone would not suffice. Resolving to purify rather than merely strike, Su-yi elevated the Shao Shinkai and suffused it with Lingli. A purifying luminance cascaded through the ruin, quenching the black flames and weakening the shadows. Lu Ruolai augmented this with her cleansing enchantments, and together they dispersed the host of corrupted apparitions. Yet the true horror remained. From the ruin's deepest heart arose a colossal black form, its presence an abyssal weight of despair. It embodied the ancient evil seeking release. The creature struck with cataclysmic force, and each blow could sunder worlds. Su Yi and Lu Rulai drew upon every reserve of power, merging the strength of Yuzhou Xian with the Shao Shinkai, while Lu Rulai gathered all her Lingli for a purifying cataclysm. In the heat of the final assault, Su Yi discerned a vulnerable nexus at the entity's core. He relayed the revelation, and together they concentrated their might. Su Yi unleashed a supreme sword qi suffused with Yuzhou Xian and Shower Shinkai, while Lu Rulai manifested a titanic purifying beam. Their converge struck the core, detonating a cataclysmic conflagration that unmade the black form and cleansed the lingering corruption. With the ancient evil vanquished, the ruins' energies stilled and stability returned. Exhausted yet victorious, Su Yi and Lu Rulai retrieved the golden tome and retreated to their ship. They resolved to fortify the cosmos against recurrence and to share the knowledge they had gleaned. They traversed star systems, conveying their discovery to myriad worlds and rallying allies. Response was swift, and earnest civilizations pledged resources and trust. Out of this coalition, Yuzhou Fengyu Lianmeng began to take form, a bulwark against cosmic threats with Su Yi and Lu Rulai at its core. Henceforth, they led the alliance in exploration and defense, shepherding a fragile peace while preparing for future trials. Their deeds echoed through the heavens, inspiring successive generations to face the unknown with courage and to labor for a luminous future across the stars. Su Yi and Lu Rulai devoted themselves wholeheartedly to constructing the Yuzhou Fengyu Lianmeng. They traversed planetary systems, exchanging hard-won knowledge and custodial philosophy. Under their appeal, disparate species and civilizations rallied to the cause, each contributing singular technologies and strengths to the nascent alliance. AI Zella offered its advanced cosmological sensors and assumed the role of sentinel. Its mastery of hyperdimensional detectors was openly shared, enabling member worlds to weave an interstellar monitoring lattice that tracked anomalous energy flux across vast reaches. Meanwhile, Su Yi and Lu Rulai disclosed portions of the Shaoshin Kiss mechanisms and latent power, inspiring scientists throughout the alliance to forge protective apparatuses capable of resisting encroaching darkness. Through patient experiments and iterative refinement, the Suo La Rin wove their mental energies into a colossal Shinnick grid. Links of consciousness threaded between worlds to form a defensive lattice that could sound alarms and disrupt an adversary's actions and intent when threats neared. The union of technology and mind produced an unprecedented guardian network for the Yuzhou Fengyu Lianmeng. As defenses matured, Su Yi and Lu Rulai turned their attention to martial preparations. They personally instructed warriors from many planets, tailoring tuition to each people's physiology and customary combat style. Su Yi deconstructed the essence of Yuxing Jianfa, adapting its principles to diverse anatomies and armaments. Lu Rulai concentrated on arcane pedagogy, guiding fighters in elemental magics and in the choreography of cooperative tactics. During a vast combined drill, combatants from dozens of worlds assembled on an enormous training expanse. Su Yi, elevated upon a platform, surveyed the formal ranks and intoned that peace in the cosmos rested in their hands. He exhorted them to value strength and solidarity alike, for when isolated any planet's might was negligible, but united they formed an impregnable bulwark. The exercises blended AI Zella's long-range, ordnance brute force, close-quarters disciplines, and Sualashinic support to simulate real theaters of war. But beneath the alliance's flourishing facade, a darker current gathered. In a remote quadrant, a clandestine cabal of renegade scientists and ambitious opportunists schooled in unorthodox energies conspired in silence. Their leader, the enigmatic Mo Ing, possessed formidable Shinnick acumen and a keen, untroubled intellect. From a dim chamber, he watched the alliance's movements and sneered at their confidence, deeming their efforts naive. Mo Ing sought an ancient cosmic power that could be harnessed into a supreme weapon to seize dominion over the cosmos. Intelligence suggested that a forgotten world guarded the key to awakening that force. He dispatched specialized operatives, dark agents honed in subterfuge, to secure the relic. Concurrently, during a routine inspection of the Alliance's defensive arrays, Su Yi and Lu Rulai detected faint, furtive energy perturbations. The signals were subtle, masked as if by design; only their attuned senses perceived them. Lu Rulai traced the aberrant signature to a desolate planet, and with Su Yi voyaged there to investigate. The world lay barren and lifeless, yet the strange fluctuations intensified. While sweeping the terrain with their sensors, they were ambushed by a contingent of masked dark agents garbed in black tactical suits and armed with advanced weaponry. A fierce skirmish ensued. Su Yi parried volleys of energy with precise sword chi, while Lu Rulai wove protective wards. Their attackers displayed disciplined coordination that marked them as members of an organized force. Amid the fight, Su Yi noticed an operative covertly moving toward their ship, likely intent on sabotage. He engaged and subdued the saboteur, deflecting an attempt to detonate a compact energy charge. Lu Ruolai, driven nearly to exhaustion by the prolonged exchanges, received timely reinforcement as Su Yi rejoined her. Together they unleashed powerful combined techniques, driving the dark agents into retreat across the bleak surface. Persisting in their search, the pair discovered an underground ruin shielded by a potent energy barrier. Runes on the barrier echoed symbols they had encountered in earlier mysteries. Employing her knowledge of ancient inscriptions, Lu Ruolai deciphered the sigils and at last dispelled the field, revealing an entrance. Within the vaults, they found murals and script that narrated the cosmos' origins and the nature of the archaic force they sought. Deeper still, they entered a cavernous chamber, housing a luminous crystal orb circled by shimmering energy filaments. Both understood that this orb was the key to the ancient power Mo Ing coveted. As they advanced, Mo Ing manifested with an otherworldly aspect, his form blurred as though partly adrift between dimensions. He mocked their presumption and claimed the relic for himself, unleashing a dense tide of darkness upon them. The darkness Mo Ing wielded proved purer and more tenacious than any foe they had earlier faced. Su Yi and Lu Ruolai marshaled their defenses. Lu Ruolai cast purifying incantations, while Su Yi employed Yuxing Jianfa to strike. Mo Ing's form slipped within his dark energies, evading direct blows. Yet in the collision of wills, Su Yi observed a transient fluctuation at Mo Ing's chest whenever he attacked an opening. He implored Lu Ruolai to target that spot when he diverted the enemy's focus. Feinting with a cascade of martial onslaughts, Su Yi drew Mo Ing's wrath, then erected a stalwart earthen bulwark of defense. Seizing the seam of vulnerability, Lu Ruolai released a concentrated purifying beam that struck Mo Ing's chest, unraveling the darkness there. Mo Ing howled as his corporeal substance wavered. Su Yi then unleashed a fusion of the Yuzhou's Hickson's resonance and Shao'er Shin Kiss, might in a golden sword chi that obliterated Mo Ing's essence, leaving only a curl of black smoke. With Mo Ing's fall, the crystal orb was secured. Su Yi and Lu Ruolai retrieved it with solemn regard, sensing the formidable energy contained within and understanding its cosmic significance. They returned to the Yuzhou Fangyu Lianming headquarters, entrusting the orb to the Alliance's research core. Scientists discovered that the orb's energies could be harmonized with existing defenses to create a novel, potent shield architecture. The Alliance entered a period of rapid upgrade as the orb's power was integrated into defensive installations. Su Yi and Lu Ruolai neither rested nor relaxed. They intensified training regimens and deepened their inquiries into the nature of the darkness, aware that Mo Ing's cabal might yet rise again. Under their stewardship, cooperation among worlds tightened, and the fusion of technology, Shinix, and arcana strengthened the Yuzhou Fangyu Lianming. At the heart of the Yuzhou Fangyu Lianming headquarters, a colossal energy reactor thrummed like a sleeping leviathan. Ancient energies trapped within a crystalline sphere were being coaxed, calibrated, and slowly integrated into the Alliance's defenses. Researchers paced and peered over readouts. By the glow of instrumentation, the command center suffused with a taut, industrious hush. Su Yi and Lu Ruolai moved between research stations with meticulous focus, scrutinizing every fluctuation to ensure the retrofit proceeded without catastrophe. A scientist from AI Zella frowned at the monitoring array and spoke with a gravity that set the room still. The ancient force was far more volatile than anticipated, its oscillations erratic enough to risk a catastrophic feedback if improperly handled. Su Yi and Lu Ruolai leaned closer to the display, watching the lines leap and shiver, and felt a cold apprehension settle in their chests. They knew that failure would not merely stall an upgrade, but could rend the headquarters itself. They scoured the supply vaults and at last located several dimly glowing fragments tucked in a corner crate. The Zhenjieshi bore cryptic striations across its surface, patterns that hinted at the cosmos itself. Placing the stones within the reactor, the scientists guided the ancient energy toward them. The turbulent readings softened the once wild curve on the monitors, smoothed into a disciplined rhythm. Joy and relief rippled through the lab. With Zhenjieshi integrated, the Alliance's defenses were upgraded, their shields strengthened against the encroaching dark. Victory came at a cost. Many vessels suffered grievous damage, and brave souls were lost. Returning to the headquarters, Su Yi and Lu Ruolai helped oversee repairs and an even more thorough hardening of the Alliance's defenses. Among the shattered remains of the Enian Konkan, they discovered strange residues imbued with malignant shadow energy. Researchers, guided by the pair's observations, fashioned a new weapon from that very essence, a device christened Enian Kexing, capable of emitting tailored waves that disrupted dark energies and annihilated shadowborn creatures. With a new countermeasure in hand, Su Yi and Lu Ruolai pressed the investigation into Mo Ing's whereabouts. A lead surfaced, pointing to a clandestine base hidden within a perilous sector known as Heian Xingyuan, a cloud of dense darkness and warped energies. Undeterred, they refitted their ship and armed it with Enian Kexing and sufficient provisions. As they approached the nebulous veil, the atmosphere thickened, instrumentation stuttered under interference, and visibility grew uncertain. Suddenly, black-winged predators bat-like, but titanic surged from the gloom and assailed their craft. Su-yi engaged evasive maneuvers, while Lu Ruolai conjured protective wards and retaliatory lightning. The predators proved vulnerable to anying Kexing's waves, dissolving into smoky remains when struck. Deeper within the Heian Xingyun, they discovered a vast obsidian edifice etched with eldritch runes radiating a pervasive malaise. Hostile figures in dark robes poured forth to encircle them, blades and arcana raised. Su-yi and Lu Ruolai fought with synchronized precision, sword and spell cleaving and purifying through the ranks. Yet the adversaries wielded a corrupting energy that sapped their strength. Lu Ruolai labored to dispel that pall, while Su-yi carved a path toward the stronghold's core. There, a malignant reactor churned with black luminescence, a dark mirror of the Alliance's earlier integration. As they dared to strike at the heart, a cold voice greeted them. Yi Xiao materialized amid the shadow and sneered that their attempt was naive, promising that this confrontation would be their undoing. Su-yi tightened his grip on the sword, its prismatic blade shone in stark defiance of the surrounding void, quivering as if to taunt the encroaching darkness. He spoke with unshakable resolve, vowing the downfall of the Mo-in Cabal. Beside him, Lu Ruolai wove seals with swift, practiced hands, gathering a spherical mode of gentle radiance between her palms, eyes alert to every nuance of Yi Xiao's movement. With a derisive snort, Yi Xiao vanished in a shadow. In an instant, a jet of black lightning lashed toward Lu Ruolai. Su-yi's blade cleaved its course, the clash warping the very air. From the earth erupted a forest of obsidian spikes. Lu Ruolai formed a translucent ward that absorbed the barrage, its surface rippling but holding firm. When the smoke unfurled, Yi Xiao, garbed in tattered robes that revealed black armor beneath, laughed with a madness that chilled marrow. With a howl, he plunged his hands into the energy reactor at the heart of the bastion, stoking the black radiance until a malevolent force swelled to suffocating intensity. Su-yi and Lu Ruolai felt a pressure that threatened to consume spirit itself. In a final desperate bid, he sought to detonate the reactor. Su-yi countered with earth suppression, conjuring titanic stone to crush the incipient blast, while Lu Ruolai assailed Yi Xiao's mind with psychic interference. Drawing upon the power of his guardian relic, Su-yi unleashed a consummate radiance that shattered Yi Xiao and quelled the reactor's black flame. The malignant light ebbed, and the bastion fell silent. No sooner had they exhaled than the dark nebula itself began to fragment. Chain reactions seeded by the released darkness destabilized the region. Su-yi and Lu Ruolai sprinted to their vessel and fled, navigating collapsing matter and titanic energy surges. Their ship rode the chaos, buffeted by the convulsions of a dying cloud, until at last the troubled nebula receded behind them. Back at the Yuzhou Fangyu Lianming headquarters, they received the accolades of a grateful coalition. Delegates from myriad worlds paid tribute to their courage. They honored the fallen with a monument etched with names, a solemn pledge to remember and to persist. Though relative peace settled over the frontier, both remained vigilant, redoubling defensive collaboration and exchanging knowledge among the stars. On a subsequent expedition to the fringe, Su-yi and Lu Ruolai discovered a mysterious spatial rift, its light distorting the surrounding firmament. A colossal metallic-hued species with crimson eyes approached, wary yet not hostile. One of them established a telepathic link and revealed that this locus was a junction of multiple universes. To return home would require 3 keys held by 3 great powers. The creature warned, for only their union could reopen the passage. Su-yi and Lu Ruolai glided through the phantasmagoric nexus where the multiverse converges, their vessels skimming a realm of iridescent mists and colossal alien planets. The vapors writhed like living ribbons, entwining strange worlds that radiated light, both gentle and fierce, weaving an otherworldly tapestry around them. Guided by the inscrutable creature's direction, they steered toward the site of the first key, hearts brimming with eager curiosity and a quiet gnawing unease. Their passage was abruptly shattered by a bizarre storm of energies. Chromatic currents coalesced into a maelstrom that sought to engulf the ship. Su-yi gripped the helm, sweat beading on his brow, while Lu Ruolai poured her spiritual force into the vessel's core to stabilize their systems. Under the pressure of the swirling onslaught, she suffused the power core with a gentle radiance, tempering the chaos until the ship's energy matrix regained equilibrium. After a harrowing struggle, they escaped the vortex and resumed their course. They set foot upon the ringed planet to find a landscape veiled in faint blue haze, carpets of bizarre crystals and luminous sigils etched into the ground. A monumental metallic edifice loomed ahead, its surfaces inscribed with arcane glyphs. As they approached, an enormous door parted, and a vacuum drew them into the dim interior. Within, the structure unfolded like a labyrinth of shadowed corridors lit only by the soft pulse of embedded crystals. Cunning traps and lethal mechanisms tested their agility, and wit flame jets collapsing floors and searing arcs of electricity, but their synergy and prowess saw them through each peril. The Guardians escorted them to a colossal arena of trials. Through riddles that taxed intellect and simulated combat against formidable phantoms, Su, Yi, and Lu Rulai proved their mettle. Their combined sagacity and martial artistry earned the Guardians' trust. At the shrine of the central temple constructed from golden stone that shimmered with inner light, the second key rested upon a gilded plinth. When they reached for it, the sanctum trembled, as if delivering a final examination. The edifice began to quake and fragment, sealing their exit with crushing masonry. With synchronized exertion, Lu Rulai marshaled her spiritual force, while Su Yi lent his strength. Together, they heaved the blocking monoliths aside and escaped as the temple groaned behind them. Lu Ruli's gaze remained fixed on the instrument array as she deftly manipulated the controls, striving to regulate the vessel's power output. Tension threaded her features, yet resolve tempered the fear in her eyes. She warned of sudden eddies of energy, and scarcely had she spoken when a titanic current like a ravenous tide lunged toward them. Su Yi yanked the helm. The ship arced like a predatory hawk and narrowly escaped destruction, only to find other currents closing and hemming them in from every direction. Realizing they could not outmaneuver the chaotic net by piloting alone, Lu Rulai conjured a shimmering barrier of spiritual force around the craft to blunt incoming shocks. Su Yi inhaled, aligning his inner spirit with the resonant core. Within him, golden radiance suffused his frame. He called upon Wuxing Jianfa and invoked the synthesis Wuxing He, the elements weaving along his blade into a harmonious, devastating chord. With a single decisive stroke, a radiant sword aura severed the nearest maelstrom, its collision echoing like thunder and scattering the surrounding turbulence. As they prepared to approach, a colossal silhouette ebbed up from the gloom. The Hundun Jushao dwarfed any adversary they had hitherto faced, its form hewn from coagulated chaos, veiled in eddies of black and white mist, twin eyes burning with malevolent red. Its bellow shattered the tenuous calm and battered the ship with seismic waves. Su Yi and Lu Rulai felt the weight of a threat that outstripped prior encounters by an intimidating margin. Systems strained under the assault. They returned fire and magic counterattacks, yet the creature's defenses absorbed their strikes with disquieting ease. The Hundun Jushao unleashed torrents of black and pale energy, a barrage that braided into a dense lattice around the ship. Su Yi executed swift evasive maneuvers, while Lu Rulai summoned conflagrations and bolts of lightning to harry the beast. Each blow scratched its surface but failed to fracture the entity's core. The creature, enraged, escalated its onslaught. The impact rent the Hundun Jushao with a despairing roar, its form convulsed as coherence unspooled and the ambient chaos wavered. Sensing the window, Su Yi guided the ship toward the obsidian dais and plucked the violet key. Instantly, all three keys flared in concert, their lights entwining to spawn a prodigious vortex of energy. The vortex engulfed both vessel and creature. The Hundun Jushao unraveled into drifting motes of chaotic essence, which the swirling force drew away and absorbed. At the threshold of the black maelstrom, Su Yi and Lu Rulai held the three keys aloft and poured into them the confluence of their spiritual might and the Yuzhou's Hickson's restorative essence. The keys responded, erupting in blinding luminescence that harmonized with the core's power to spawn a purifying onslaught. Light met shadow with tremulous force. The dark currents writhed, but could not withstand the combined sanctity. Gradually, the black vortex contracted and unraveled, its energies dispersed until the firmament regained luster and the stars reclaimed their brilliance. Peace had returned to the cosmos, and Yuzhou Fengyu Lianming Zongbu was awash with jubilant celebration. Delegates from distant worlds presented rare gifts to express their gratitude to Su Yi and Lu Rulai. In the vast plaza, prismatic lights shimmered and music mingled with laughter, yet beneath the veneer of revelry, a subtle unease lingered in both Su Yi and Lu Rulai. When the festivities concluded, the two returned to the Alliance's inner sanctum, a repository of the universe's most precious knowledge and technologies. Su Yi sat before a towering holographic display, watching torrents of stellar data scroll across the screen, forehead creased with concern. He confided his suspicion to Lu Rulai, suggesting that the dark force had been dispelled with suspicious ease, as though an unseen hand had manipulated events to lull them into complacency. Lu Rulai, her fingers trailing over the brittle pages of ancient tomes that chronicled cosmic origins and the lore of shadowed energies, admitted she shared his misgivings. Her recent studies had revealed patterns to the resurgence of darkness that did not align with the current occurrence. She feared they had overlooked a crucial clue. Determined to uncover the truth, Su Yi and Lu Rulai embarked once more into the starry expanse in a retrofitted vessel equipped with the most sensitive detectors capable of perceiving the faintest energy perturbations. They navigated toward the coordinates where a black vortex had previously manifested and activated their instruments. The readouts revealed not only familiar signatures of darkness, but also an enigmatic energy previously unseen. The mysterious energy was faint yet pervasive, subtly influencing nearby fluxes. As Lu Ruolai peered at the patterns, a jarring alarm shattered the taut concentration aboard their craft. Unidentified flyers soon appeared on the sensors, converging with unnerving speed. Su-Yi maneuvered with nimble precision while Lu Ruolai prepared her arcane defenses. The intruders were diamond-shaped constructs, their metallic surfaces gleaming with an otherworldly luster and radiating a bone-chilling cold. They emitted no hail or parley and immediately unleashed a barrage of lethal energy beams. Su-Yi deftly evaded and counterattacked with the vessel's energy cannons while Lu Ruolai erected a lay of spirit wards that shrouded the ship. Observing their foes, Lu Ruolai discerned that the craft communicated through a high-frequency signal. She proposed an electronic disruption to fracture their coordination. Su-Yi deployed a potent jamming waveform, and under its influence the attackers faltered. Seizing the opportunity, the duo launched a decisive counteroffensive and ultimately scattered the hostile flotilla. Their subsequent analysis traced the construct's origin to the cosmos periphery, a shrouded sector ringed by an impenetrable energy barrier. With resolve, they set course for that enigmatic region. Upon approach, they found the barrier far more formidable than anticipated. Assaults from their armaments simply rebounded. Through empathic attunement, Lu Ruolai sensed that the barrier's oscillations corresponded to an archaic cosmic rune, and by invoking her knowledge of those symbols, she began to communicate with the glyphs. The markings responded, and a minute aperture opened. Su-Yi piloted the ship through the breach into a domain steeped in mist and starlight. Within the mist-laden expanse, colossal stone pillars floated like monoliths crusted with unfamiliar inscriptions. They discovered a vast ruin whose sealed gate bore the same sigils as the hostile craft. Using spirit resonance, Lu Ruolai coaxed the gate open, revealing an interior dim and haunted by the pale shimmer of luminescent crystals. The chamber appeared to be a research installation of a vanished civilization. At its core sat a massive instrument surrounded by a web of energy conduits. As they examined the apparatus, it shuddered and projected indecipherable images and glyphs. Lu Ruolai's facility with ancient tongues allowed her to parse fragments of the record. The archive revealed that the civilization had attempted to harness a prodigious cosmic energy, but the experiment had failed catastrophically, unleashing uncontrolled forces. To contain the danger, they constructed the sealed region and the defensive constructs, yet the instrument remained a volatile nexus. Su-Yi pondered whether the earlier shadowy incursions were connected to this runaway energy. Lu Ruolai concurred, surmising that some party may have discovered the concealed peril and sought to exploit it. Before they could probe further, boots echoed through the corridors. A cadre of robed figures masked their faces and brandished weapons as they surged from the darkness to encircle the pair. The leader declared that intrusion would not be forgiven. Combat ignited. Su-Yi drew his blade and unleashed the disciplined arcs of his elemental sword technique, while Lu Ruolai answered with tempestuous spells that fractured the gloom with fire and lightning. The assailants were skilled and relentless, their weaponry bore traces of the same corruptive darkness. Observing this, Su-Yi warned that these attackers were likely allied with the earlier menace. Lu Ruolai invoked purification rites to purge the taint from enemy armaments as Su-Yi pressed forward with decisive sword storms. After a brutal clash, they broke the encirclement and pressed deeper into the ruin. At the heart, they found an immense energy core whose baleful luminescence pulsed with mounting instability. The core thrummed like a caged star and exuded waves of malignant power. As they neared, the core detonated in a blinding flare that hurled them aside. The catastrophe birthed a ravenous singularity that began to consume structure and matter alike. The black hole's gravity devoured walls and the remains of their foes. Su-Yi shouted that they must flee before the ruin and its horrors were swallowed whole. Struggling against the inexorable pull, Su-Yi erected a layered barrier with the quintessence of his martial arts to counteract the draw, while Lu Ruolai augmented their pace with spirit acceleration. Against ruin and rupture, they raced toward the opened gate. Moments before the singularity swallowed the entire site, they burst free and reclaimed their vessel. Exhausted, they collapsed into their seats as the ruin vanished into the void. Aboard their ship with the stars steady once more beyond the viewport, both understood that the revelation was but a fragment of a larger design. The runaway energy, the constructs, and the black-clad conspirators hinted at a peril more vast and deliberate than they had imagined. They resolved to return to Yuzhou Fengyu Lianmeng Zongbu and disclose their findings, for the preservation of cosmic peace would demand vigilance and alliance. As the ship sped through starlit corridors, worry shadowed their features, for their guardianship had only just begun. Su-Yi and Lu Ruolai returned to the Yuzhou Fengyu Lianmeng headquarters. Aboard their battered vessel, hearts weighed with exhaustion and anxiety. The shuttle settled onto the landing pad, and the hatch yawned open. They stepped out with measured, heavy strides. Senior members of the Lianmen, apprised of their return, gathered on the tarmac, faces taut with concern. An elder from Isola confronted them with urgent intensity, energy staff trembling in his hand. He demanded to know what had transpired. Su Yi inhaled deeply and recounted in steady detail the eerie discoveries within the forbidden sector. As he spoke, the assembly's countenances grew sterner. What had seemed a contained crisis now hinted at a far greater conspiracy. A towering chieftain of a martial species spoke with tense resolve. If the rogue energy core was indeed entwined with the encroaching darkness, the implications were dire. The council must devise a rapid countermeasure. Failure would permit the shadowed forces to gain a foothold once more. Lu Ruolai affirmed her agreement and produced a dainty hollow recorder containing the inscriptions and diagrams she had photographed in the ruins. The prospect electrified Su Yi, and Lu Ruolai. Hope flickered in their eyes. The scientists admitted the texts offered only cryptic mention of Xingqian Ji Li without a map or method for obtaining it, yet they felt certain more clues lay buried in the fragments. Thus a ceaseless campaign of study commenced day and night, while the two pledged to voyage outward in search of any lead that might reveal the force's provenance. Their odyssey took them between worlds and minds, seeking counsel from sages of disparate races. On the remote planet Lama, they discovered a reclusive oracle dwelling within an ancient tower, shrouded by a palpable field of power. Su Yi and Lu Ruolai approached with composed reverence and posed their questions about Xingqian Ji Li. A vast nebula unfolded before them, a constellation of lights arranged in a pattern that spoke of an older wisdom. At its center, half-veiled and radiant, stood the Xingqian Shindianan edifice, glittering with starlight, suffused with an aura both sacred and severe. As they edged closer, a sudden, irresistible force arrested their craft. The temple was circled by an energy barrier that appeared to evaluate intruders. They set to work with complementary resolve. Su Yi attuned to subtle fluxes with his Yuxing Ji Li senses, feeling the ebb and pulse of nearby power. Lu Ruolai applied her acute perception and spiritual discipline to read the artifact's signatures and relationships. Some objects lashed out with violent energies to deter them, others were veiled within labyrinthine currents. Together they persevered. After arduous effort, Su Yi retrieved the first key from a sphere radiant with golden light. Its surface bore cryptic runes, and it thrummed with comforting potency. Lu Ruolai discovered the second key embedded within a crystal pillar that glowed like a tranquil, star-filled sea. Yet the third key remained elusive despite exhaustive search, and impatience crept in as moments stretched. Reflection brought Su Yi a sudden revelation about the chamber's architecture. He steered them toward the central maelstrom, a vortex of prismatic currents, whose pull suggested concealment rather than annihilation. Fashioning a protective barrier with her spiritcraft, Lu Ruolai shielded them as Su Yi called upon his elemental discipline to steady their forms against the vortex's drag. At the vortex's rim, he saw a flicker of violet and reached into the swirling light. The object transmuted into the long-sought third key the moment his grasp closed upon it. Triumph swelled between them as they reclaimed all three keys and returned to the temple's threshold. When the keys were set into the gate, its seals yielded with a slow, resonant opening that exhaled a sacred, formidable energy. Hand in hand with resolve renewed, Su Yi and Lu Ruolai entered the Xingqian Shindian. They understood that somewhere within the sanctum lay the means to avert the looming calamity, Xingqian Ji Li itself waiting to assess whether they had the merit to marshal it for the salvation of the cosmos. Su Yi and Lu Ruolai crossed the threshold of Xingqian Shindian and were immediately embraced by an atmosphere suffused with otherworldly starlight. Odd runes gleamed across the walls, each glyph seeming to breathe like a living spirit, casting a faint yet singular radiance. The floor was laid with translucent crystal. Through its depths, countless stars shimmered against a profound darkness, as if the universe itself had been condensed beneath their feet. Lu Ruolai murmured in awe, her voice drifting softly through the vast chamber. Su Yi inclined his head and tightened his grip on his sword, vigilant despite the temple's tranquil facade. They advanced along a corridor where the ambient energy shifted subtly, with each step a quiet reminder that serenity in such places often concealed latent peril. A colossal stone door suddenly loomed ahead, its surface carved with spiraling stellar motifs. The patterns moved with an uncanny liveliness, rotating and reconfiguring into mysterious tableaus. Su Yi examined the gate with resolute eyes and told Lu Ruolai his conviction that the source of the Xingqian power lay beyond it. When they reached to push, an invisible force flung them backward the instant their hands made contact. Rising to her feet, Lu Ruolai dusted herself off and fixed her gaze upon the door. A melodious bell tolled within the sanctuary, and the chamber began to transform. The previously inert star patterns ignited into motion and coalesced into luminous Xingqian sprites that fluttered and danced around the pair. Some resembled streaking meteors, others shone like gentle, steady suns. One sprite hovered before Su Yi and spoke in a clear, crystalline voice, inviting them to undergo the trials required to claim the Xingqian power. Exchanging a determined look, Su, Yi, and Lu Ruolai assented to the challenge. The first trial tested their strength. The sprites gathered into a massive orb of energy and hurled it toward them. Su Yi drew his longsword and unleashed the five elements blade technique, his sword chi slicing toward the sphere. Lu Ruolai cast potent spells that intertwined with Su Yi's strikes. The collision produced a thunderous blast and rippling waves of force, yet they held their ground and pressed the assault until the energy sphere shattered. The sprites rejoiced and acknowledged their might. Next came the test of intellect. The sprites presented a sequence of intricate riddles and archaic sigils demanding their solution within a strict span of time. Lu Ruoli's erudition and incisive reasoning deciphered the symbols swiftly, while Su Yi contributed alternative perspectives that guided their thought. Sweat beaded on Lu Ruoli's brow as seconds slipped away, but with steady resolve they solved every enigma, prompting fresh acclaim from the celestial guardians. Emerging from their introspective trials, the sprites retreated and smiled with approval. They declared that Su Yi and Lu Ruolai had proven their strength, wisdom, and steadfast faith, and thus were worthy of inheriting the Xingqian power. The stone door eased open and a gentle, yet potent current of energy flowed outward, enveloping them. They stepped through and beheld a vast floating Xingqian core suspended at the temple's heart, a radiant nexus circled by streams of starlight. The sprites guided them nearer, and at the moment of contact the core drew their consciousness within. In that interior expanse, they witnessed the genesis and decay of cosmos, the birth and death of stars, and the rise and fall of innumerable civilizations. They perceived the immense law-bearing essence of the Xingqian power, an ordering force capable of balancing and commanding energies across existence. The Xingqian power seeped into them, and their bodies responded. Su Yi's skin acquired a faint stellar luminescence, and his gaze deepened, as if he could glimpse cosmic truths. Lu Ruoli's hair took on the brilliance of the night sky, and luminous motes of energy flowed from her fingertips. Re-emerging from the core, they found their might and understanding profoundly amplified. After leaving the Xingqian Shindy, Su Yi and Lu Ruolai were enveloped in a delicate luminescence. With every footfall, a fleeting constellation bloomed beneath them, a constellation that vanished as swiftly as it had appeared. The cosmos no longer presented itself as mere vastness to their senses. It had become an intricate lattice woven from the potency of stars. The currents of dark matter and the oscillations of energy tides revealed themselves with crystalline clarity. They hovered in the void. Su Yi extended his hand and drew a curtain of starlight that unfolded before them, its surface alive with innumerable star charts and sigils. He spoke with steady timbre, yet his gaze could not conceal a trace of disquiet. The guidance left by the star sprites suggested that nodes resonant with the stellar core lay scattered across the universe, and that safeguarding these nodes might well be the keystone of protecting all existence. Lu Ruolai let the starlight sift through her hair and nodded. She admitted their mastery of Xingqian. Ji Li remained raw and then faltered, brows knitting. An unnerving chill seemed to pry at them, a gaze that had lingered since departing the shrine and had only grown more insistent. Su Yi drew his longsword in an instant, the blade shedding a silver aura as alertness seized him. A black arrow like ink in motion sliced past and tore a rip through the fabric of space itself. From the rift emerged a figure in a sable robe, features consumed by shadow, leaving only a pair of phosphorescent green eyes that burned like ghostly flames. His voice, hoarse and cold, carried a tenor from places best left unnamed. He dismissed his own identity as irrelevant and declared their Xingqian Ji Li would be his. He produced a lacquered staff crowned with a blue dread gem that exhaled a nauseating corruption. With a single sweep, countless ebony tendrils unfurled from the void and sought to ensnare them. Lu Ruolai formed intricate seals and chanted, conjuring a radiant cage of starshine that blossomed into a luminous net which bound the tendrils. The dark appendages, however, began to corrode that radiance on contact, emitting choking smoke. Su Yi answered with the artistry of sword and star, each stroke twisting the very lattice of space and sending torrents of stellar chi as blade formed torrents toward the robed aggressor. The remedy proved futile against the staff's defense. A black shield rose to intercept every assault. The blue dread gem swelled with malevolence and exuded an oppressive wave that seemed to blunt the flow of Xingqian Ji Li within them, rendering their energies sluggish and their movements heavier. Recognizing the stratagem, Lu Ruolai urged restraint. Brute force would not suffice. Su Yi closed his eyes and listened to the cosmic law he had glimpsed within the stellar core. He proclaimed that Xingqian Ji Li was not solely a weapon but a principle of balance. Raising his hands, he intoned words that drew the ambient star power into a vast celestial disk. The disk turned with measured grace and emitted a soothing, potent radiance that diminished the staff's suppressive influence. When Su Yi perceived a rhythmic dimming of the gem amid the caster's incantations, a plan crystallized. He cried for concentrated assault upon the jewel, identifying it as the linchpin of the foe's potency. Lu Rulai gathered herself and unleashed a cataclysmic pillar of starlight as Su Yi manifested his ultimate blade technique, the Starfall Ruin. The combined onslaught fractured the blue dread stone. The robed figure uttered a furious roar, flashed, and vanished into the void. His summoned creatures disintegrated with him. Exhausted, they collapsed within the emptiness. Their clothing hung in tatters, and every inch of their bodies bore wounds, yet their eyes burned with resolute determination. Lu Rulai observed that the adversary would assuredly return, and Su Yi agreed, noting that this encounter confirmed the dark faction had perceived the inheritance of Xingqian Ji Li. Rest could be brief. They must locate the resonant nodes to fortify their strength. With unshaken resolve, they plunged into the nebula, ready for confrontation with darker powers and stiffer trials. Neither fear nor hesitation remained in their gaze. They bore the mantle of Xingqian Ji Li's inheritors, entrusted with the preservation of the cosmos, and they would not yield an inch. The instant they crossed into the Xingyun, Su Yi and Lu Rulai felt themselves submerged in a flowing sea of purple light. The nebular substance was viscous like liquid radiance, each ripple trembling with faint energy and weaving a delicate lattice of illumination around them. At Lu Rulai touch, motes of violet light skittered across her skin and gathered in her palm into a crystalline xinghua before vanishing like breath on glass. Su Yi frowned as the Xingqian Ji Li in his body hesitated, sluggish under an unseen distortion. The central Xingqian Jidian, which should have hovered luminous at the core, lay entangled in an inky vortex. Countless black vines writhed from that maw, coiling like avaricious appendages about the node. A thin, indistinct keening rose from the void, at first like the rustle of distant wind, and then swelling into a chorus of laments. The sound sharpened into a rasping roar as the purple matter began to boil, contorting into grotesque faces whose hollow eyes burned with an eerie blue and whose gaping mouths spewed corrosive black mist. Su Yi drew his sword. The Xingqian Ji Li flowed along the blade and crowned its tip with a brilliant edge. He slashed, and where his sword passed, the black fog hissed and evaporated, but more faces surged from the seething nebula, their fingers hardening into barbed spikes that lunged for them. With a derisive curl of her lips, she mocked them as paltry guardians of the node. The vines coiling the Xingqian Jidian swelled and lashed out, their barbed surfaces made the very fabric of space ripple. Su Yi met their assault with blade and force, each strike sparking against something unnaturally resilient, vibrating up his arm like a blow against tempered steel. Lu Rulai seized an opening to weave a binding, summoning the Xinzhou Lelong chains of light meant to imprison the woman. She merely smiled and amplified the dark glow about her. With a single command, the Lelong shattered into shards that became lethal projectiles. Su Yi lunged across them and took the brunt of their impact, blood staining his lips as he erected a hard-won shield of Xingqian Ji Li to protect her. Lu Rulai would not be deterred. Hair lifting as if in a phantom wind, she gathered a colossal spinning star wheel and proclaimed the Xinglun Shenpan. The woman met her with a curved blade streaked in black ichor and unleashed the Zuan Minjiazhan, a vast dark purple crescent that sundered space itself. The two forces collided with cataclysmic fury. Purple and sable light tore the surrounding Xingyun apart, vaporizing great swaths of matter and laying bare the void behind. In the aftermath, Su Yi observed tiny fissures spidering across the vines where the energies had bitten. He shouted for Lu Rulai to hammer those cracks. The collapse of the woman's form unmade the black tendrils as well, and the Xingqian Jidian sighed back into gentle radiance. The once turbulent Xing instilled, returning to a fragile serenity. Exhausted, their garments tattered and bodies scarred, Su Yi and Lu Rulai sank into the quiet between stars. Triumph flickered in their eyes even as their limbs trembled. Su Yi managed a weary smile and confessed that this victory was but the opening of a longer war. As heirs of the Xingqian Ji Li, they would press onward without hesitation to guard every mote of starlight in the boundless expanse. Beneath the tranquil halo of the Xingqian Jidian, Su Yi and Lu Rulai lay stunned by fatigue when the surrounding nebula shuddered with an uncanny tremor. The placid purple currents began to twist into vortices as innumerable black fissures webbed across the void. From their depths came the grinding cries of turning gears, as if some ancient mechanism were rousing from slumber. Lu Rulai sprang upright, strands of starlight in her hair unraveling into chaos. Her attunement to the Xingqian Ji Li told her these rents were not natural tears, but ruptures torn by malign intent. Su Yi rose swiftly, long sword held across his chest, the blade reflecting the wavering silhouettes within the rents, contorted limbs and bone blades glinting with cold light. The Xingai Xiaowei swept a crescent of sable blade energy that ripped the void. Su Yi slipped aside, the sword sheen grazed his shoulder, leaving a smoking wound. He gritted his teeth against the pain and unleashed his refined Xingui Jianfa, carving arcs that mimicked celestial orbits and diverting another blade wave. More rents blossomed, disgorging swarms of star skeletons that vanished into motes of stardust only to reconstitute elsewhere. Lu Ruoli star arrows could scatter their bodies, but the fragments coalesced again, their regeneration braided to the dark energy pouring from the fissures. They could not permit the flood to continue. Su Yi's Xingqian Ji Li crystallized into brilliant armor around him as he fixed on the densest cluster of rents and raised his sword. He invoked Xingyun Feng Bao, a cascade of burning stellar fragments plummeted, striking the breaches with thunderous detonations. Some rents began to seal, yet the bombardment only maddened the guardians, who assaulted like an enraged swarm. Without warning, a colossal Xingai Xiaowei loomed behind Su Yi, its scaffolding hewn from the wreckage of several suns' bone wings, eclipsing great swaths of the nebula. Lu Ruoli surged to his side, crossing her hands before her chest and manifesting a luminous Xingui Bailai. The crystalline shield unfurled but emitted a strained hum upon contact with the bony wings. The Guardian's blows were of an order beyond ordinary Xingai. Each impact numbed Su Yi's grip. Dark corrosion gnawed at the shield's edges and blood threaded Lu Ruoli's mouth, yet she held fast. At a critical instant, Su Yi remembered the Xing Gongming from the Xingqian Hexen. He inhaled deeply and poured his Xingqian Ji Li into his blade, directing Lu Ruoli to concentrate all of her power upon the creature's breast. Comprehending without words, she compounded her radiance with his, their energies braiding into a single resplendent column. The beam struck the Guardian's chest, where a dark purple crystallite's controlicus was embedded. Under the onslaught, the crystal began to scream and fracture. The other Guardians, sensing calamity, abandoned their assaults to cluster protectively around it. Su Yi and Lu Ruoli fed the column until the crystal ruptured in a cataclysmic detonation. The colossal frame collapsed into granulated ruin, and the remaining Xingai Xiaowei, deprived of their control spark, collapsed into dust. The rents, bereft of their sustaining force, began to close with swift resolve. Victory seemed within grasp. The creature's voice came like boulders grinding together. It mocked them as mere insects for having ruptured its Xingai phalanx, while asserting that the Xingqian Jidian must ultimately bow to it. It lashed a wave of sable energy at the node. Su Yi and Lu Ruoli surged to intercept. Su Yi executed Xingxing Baihu, conjuring a spiraling astral shield with his blade, while Lu Ruoli channeled Xingui Jinghua into the barrier to cleanse and temper the malignant surge. The converging forces flared into blinding radiance, and the backlash hurled them both to the edge of the nebula, blood spilling at their mouths. They rose and met each other's gaze without an ounce of fear. Su Yi tightened his grip on the sword. Lu Ruoli gathered the Xingqian Ji Li about her like a second skin. Behind them, the light of the Xingqian Jidian flickered with a tremulous intensity, as if the node itself shivered at the prospect of the titanic reckoning to come. Su Yi's back smashed heavily against the dark violet barrier of condensed nebula. A metallic taste rose in his throat as he fixed his gaze upon the fetid scale-armored aberration. Black tar-like mists coiled about the creature, each breath stirring in the void a ring of inky ripples. Wherever the nebular matter met, those fumes had hissed and seared into dust. Lu Ruoli, are you all right? Su Yi struggled to rise, but found his right leg numb from the aftershock of the energy wave. Lu Ruoli leaned against a floating shard of meteorite. The starlight at her fingertips guttered like a candle, and the shimmer in her hair had dimmed to a pale glow. She said weakly that her starlight had been suppressed by the creature's corrosive power. Before her sentence finished, the monster strode closer across the warped space, each footfall leaving smoking imprints on the ground. With a sudden serrated howl, the beast opened its barbed maw and expelled a slick of emerald toxin that broke apart in the air into countless venomous serpents. Su Yi summoned the power of the stars, and the runes along his blade flared. He slashed an arching sword chi that met the toxin with a piercing shriek, choking the air with purple miasma. Lu Ruoli formed a seal, and the remaining starlight gathered above them into a protective dome that enveloped both. The creature sneered at such trifles. Its claws swelled threefold, and it struck the barrier with bone-splintering force. Lu Ruoli stifled a cry as blood bled at the corner of her mouth, and a spiderweb of cracks spread across the shield. Seizing the moment, Su Yi surged forward, his blade tracing a brilliant arc toward the monster's throat. The scales did not flinch. Dark gold sigils bloomed over the armor and violently repelled his sword. The backlash split Su Yi's hand and nearly wrenched the blade free. Die! He bellowed, and the star core detonated in a blinding eruption that rippled outward. The beast howled in agony as the runes flaking from its scales shattered and were flung aside. Su Yi collapsed, blood pouring from his mouth, his vision swimming from the backlash of energy. As he teetered on the brink, Lu Ruoli's body burst into golden light. An ancient star sigil bloomed at her brow, and a column of illumination shot into the heavens, bathing the nebula in gilded radiance. The monster froze and recoiled in disbelief. Lu Ruoli rose suspended in midair, encircled by 12 luminous starrings that exuded a staggering, oppressive majesty. Her voice took on an ethereal authority as she declared the awakening of her Xingqian Swamai. With a graceful sweep, the 12 rings transformed into 12 blades of light that dove upon the creature. It swung its claws in frantic defense, but was driven back step by step. Seizing the advantage, Lu Ruolai formed another seal and cried Xingui Shenpan. Scores of golden shafts of adjudication rained from the heavens, engulfing the abomination. When the conflagration subsided, only a charred heap of scales remained. Lu Ruolai, having forcibly woken her bloodline, was spent and plummeted. Su-yi, every fiber of him strained, staggered to catch her and cradled her limply. Relief washed over him until he noticed her pallor. She opened her eyes briefly and managed a faint smile, confessing that though her Xingshin Swamai had subdued the monster, for now something else was wrong. The nebula convulsed violently. Star nodes flared in the distance, and a vast obsidian rift yawned open, emitting low, dread-laden roars. From within the black tear, a pair of crimson eyes blinked open. Su-yi tightened his grip on his blade and shielded Lu Ruolai behind him, resolve hardening in his gaze. The true crisis had only just begun, and from the rift a calamity that threatened the cosmos itself stirred to life. At the instant the scarlet leviathan eye unlatched itself, the nebula's light streams convulsed like ink wrested by an invisible hand, surging inexorably toward a yawning fissure. Cradled in Su-yi's arms, Lu Ruolai shuddered violently as the remnant aureole of her star god lineage was violently torn into motes of golden radiance and siphoned into that abyss. Sensing the malevolent consumption of the celestial power, Su-yi shielded her instinctively. Starforce coalesced about his form into a second carapace of light, yet even this second skin bowed and warped under the ravaging pull. From the depths of the cleft came the rasp of bone upon bone, and around the leviathan eye warped sigils surfaced and flowed like some ancient script made corporeal. An invasive tide of consciousness sought to insinuate itself into Su-yi's mind, conjuring afterimages of planets shattering in void-robed silhouettes, convulsing in laughter beneath a sanguine moon, and at the nexus of stellar nodes a pulsating dark violet heart that devoured all starlight. Lu Ruolai gripped Su-yi's wrist with a tremulous urgency and urged him to avert his gaze. With great effort, she summoned a sliver of starlight between her fingers, forming a fragile veil that snapped like glass the moment it touched the leviathan eye, revealing that the ocular behemoth was not flesh but a projection of will, each of its gazes laced with a corrosion that gnawed at the soul. The fissure widened abruptly and spat forth spined tendrils, their surfaces streaming with an umbral violet energy that warped the surrounding space like scorched canvas. Su-yi's blade sang the revised Xingui sword technique, striking the nearest tendril and scattering flecks of light, but the blow left only faint white scars as the tendril bifurcated into dozens of venomous filaments that coiled about his sword. Lu Ruolai, breath ragged upon a meteorite, loosed starward arrows at the tendril joints, but the dark violet energy devoured them as if they had never been. Responding in kind, Lu Ruolai summoned the last of her strength. 12 star halos shimmered into being and resonated with the chains to form a hemispheric ward. The tendrils crashed against this barrier, spitting sparks, while a web of hairline fractures began to spider across its surface. Su-yi's light armor splintered in sections, and his palm bled from the backlash. Gazing into the Leviathan's expanding pupil, he discerned a dim azure flame burning at its core, the fragile kernel of an Yuan Zhizhu's consciousness. Clinging to that revelation, Su-yi ordered Lu Ruolai to buy him but a breath's time. She forced a final invocation, and the 12 pillars of starlight descended to temporarily entrap the tendrils. Seizing the opening, Su-yi became a meteor in the Xingyun flash, Starforce coalescing into a conical lance at his sword's tip. Yet at 3 inches from that azure ember, his beam encountered a shield of dark violet energy that arrested him. The projection bellowed with derision, and an intensified suction threatened to purge his Starforce, splintering his luminous armor. In the direst instant, Su-yi reversed the current of his Starforce, transmuting the lance's brilliance into obsidian hue, a forbidden art recorded in the core as to govern darkness with darkness. The black beam pierced the pupil, and the projection shrieked as the fissure convulsed. Tendrils dissolved into soot-like vapor, while the projection fragmented, but the dark art rebounded in retribution, and Su-yi was flung earthward, broken by backlash. Lu Ruolai's luminous cage shattered as well. Staggering, she launched herself at the heart of the abyss, unbuttoning her garment to reveal the star god's sigil upon her chest, which flared with blinding light. When consciousness returned, he awoke among chilled stardust to an uncanny silence. Both in Yuan Zhizhu and Lu Ruolai were gone, only the Xingshin Jidian emitted a faint golden pulse. Su-yi tightened his grasp upon the node, resolve kindling in his gaze. He vowed to find Lu Ruolai and to annihilate in Yuan Zhizhu. Securing the node against his chest, he launched himself into a pathless expanse, unaware that a bruisered star was rising in his wake, portending a foe yet greater and more relentless. Su-yi floated in the void, his body swathed in a filigree of stardust. At the heart of the Xingshin Jidian glimmered a tremulous vein of golden light, flickering in his palm like a dying will-o'-the-wisp. A metallic sweetness churned in his throat, and a sharp ringing assaulted his right ear as though countless needles were pricking his eardrum. He turned his neck with difficulty and gazed toward the starfield where the battle had erupted. It had collapsed into a black abyss, its remaining energy currents writhing like venomous serpents and shredding the fragments of a once majestic nebula. He croaked a name, Lu Ruoli's voice hoarse and ragged. The last thread of starglow cradled against his chest was fading, echoing the resolute arc of her vanishing light. He forced himself upright, but found the flow of stellar power through his meridians sluggish and agonizing. Each motion of strength cut him like a blade. When he looked down, dark violet corrosion had mottled his torso, veins traced by creeping rot. Su-yi lunged forward, seizing only void. The node's glow dimmed and crystallized into a cold gem. He gripped it so tightly his knuckles blanched and his nails cut into his palm. Lihuo, as was Sunbi's Kangxing Dai, was marked on charts as forbidden territory, a deathscape of ravenous dark matter vortices and rampaging stellar wreckage. He inhaled, forced the star's power to move, and suffered waves of pain. Blood welled at his lips and then hardened into a broken cuirass of light across his skin. Cradling the crystal, he set his course toward the forbidden belt, braving residual maelstroms of Inuan energy, whose black mists sizzled against his light armor. Realizing the man was consumed by Inuan influence, Su-yi rallied quickly. He remembered a technique recorded within the heart of the Starkari Zinkai Gongshan. He poured his remaining stellar power into a nearby boulder and shouted the command to reverse its resonance. The warped glyphs on the stone flared gold and chimed with the patterns on the stranger's armor. The man howled in agony as the spear clattered free and the violet light drained from his gaze. Weak and bewildered, he confessed he was a guardian of the Xing Shun Jitan whose mind had been eroded by Inuan forces. He warned Su-yi that the altar lay at the core of the dusk-ired star, then his form faded, leaving behind a silver key inscribed with ancient runes. The entity's voice echoed like a chorus of the damned, calling him an insignificant insect and declaring the star a prison for the star god's bloodline. Dark purple shackles swelled and lunged. Su-yi clutched the silver key and poured himself into the well of his remaining power. He cried out to Lu Ruoli, vowing to free her even if he had to tear through the abyss itself. He lashed at the chains with his blade, the steel striking the dark force and birthing a blinding conflagration. Thus began the decisive struggle for the destiny of the Xingshan lineage. Dark purple chains coiled like venomous serpents toward Su-yi. The silver key in his hand flared with a piercing radiance, severing the nearest links. Seizing the moment, he lunged for the altar. Beneath his feet, the Xingshun Zhili condensed into a spiraling star track. Each step left scorched traces of celestial light suspended in the void. The phantasmal form of an Yuan Zhizhu issued a furious roar. Space within the star began to warp, and innumerable shards of dark matter shot forth like blades. Su-yi slashed with his long sword. The arcing blade met the dark fragments and detonated in a series of thunderous explosions. A scorching blast sent him hurtling. He struck his back against the star column at the altar's rim. Wiping blood from his mouth, he raised his eyes to find Lu Ruoli's Xingshan Yinji being eaten away by the purple chains. Her golden radiance was being swallowed by shadow. Lu Ruoli's weak voice echoed across the chamber, urging Su-yi to stay back, warning him that an Yuan Zhizhu awaited to ensnare him. The words barely faded when 12 black stelae surged up around the altar, veins of blue dread runes pulsing on their faces. They crystallized a prison that held Su-yi at the center. The shadow of the abyssal lord sank lower, a crimson eye congealed into flesh, and countless tendrils unfurled, each one imbued with the power of annihilation. And Yuan Zhizhu shrieked in agony as the stellar river seared its tendrils. Su-yi dashed toward the Xingshan Yinji, but a dark purple barrier halted him 3 paces from Lu Ruoli. Corrosive patterns writhed across its surface, the same rift energy he had encountered at the star node. His sword struck the barrier only to be sucked, as if into quagmire. The abyssal force coiled around his blade. A derisive voice declared the corporeal form a mere vessel and hinted at the true source of power. Before it finished, the star core convulsed violently. A black fissure tore the void, and from it stepped a figure draped in raven robes, true manifestation of an Yuan Zhizhu. Ink-black mist coiled about the figure, cracking the space beneath each footfall. With a sweep of its hand, the 12 stelae turned to dust. An invisible force slammed Su-yi backward against the central star column, which groaned as its starlight filigree began to flake away. The robed figure spoke with a voice like metal scraped upon metal, claiming the Xingshun bloodline as its prize and promising Lu Ruoli fall. Its skeletal fingers tightened the purple chains. Lu Ruoli's mark flashed piercingly as golden energy gushed like a fountain. Su-yi staggered up only to find his Xingshun Zhili nearly spent and his meridians screaming from overuse. At the brink of calamity, a single recollection steadied him: Lu Ruoli's last exhortation to find the Xing Shinji Tan. His gaze fell upon the intricate star patterns carved into the altar floor, and he realized they echoed the runes on the silver key. Roused to fury, the robed being convulsed as its surrounding mists reshaped into countless snarling faces that shrieked. It raised both hands, and the star began to collapse, gravitational forces rending space. Su-yi sheltered Lu Ruolai behind him. Around their skins, the Xingchen Ji Li and the Xingshun's power fused, forming a new suit of armor that gleamed with interwoven gold and violet, each pattern hummed with cosmic secrets. With a cry of rupture, their combined light tore the shield asunder, and the blade sought the robed figure's throat. In the instant before impact, the figure dispersed into a volition of black mist. A cold blade of dread lanced Su-yi's back as he was struck by a crushing blow and hurled like a projectile. Lu Ruolai drove forward, forming a titanic star sword, but the robed entity seized it barehanded, and its abyssal force began to corrode the Xingshun power. Lu Ruolai choked blood at the corner of her mouth as the sword dimmed. Summoning the last of his strength, Su-yi fused the Xingchen Ji Li and Xingshun power into a single scintillant surge and launched it at the foe. They cried die in unison as their energies collided with the robed body. The resulting eruption tore the star core apart. The robed figure's form went translucent, giving a despairing roar. The backlash of power consumed both Su-yi and Lu Ruolai. They plummeted as consciousness faded. In his final moments, Su-yi watched Lu Ruolai's image solidify, becoming whole, while beyond the star a nascent nebula slowly blossomed into existence. Stardust fell like sifted snow upon his cheek. When Su-yi opened his eyes with a start, the first sensation was a tearing ache along his meridians. Violent convergence within Yuan Jizhu had forced Xingshun power to fuse with the celestial force until his channels nearly split. Power surged within him like turbulent currents, and every breath tasted of iron. He struggled upright and found himself upon a drifting shard of a star core adrift in an ocean of endless stardust. The once incandescent stellar core lay collapsed, its ruin transformed into a myriad of flickering lights that drifted in the void. Not far away, the figure of Lu Ruolai hovered among the dust. Her phantom seemed more substantial than before. A pale golden hem fluttered with the currents of stardust. Her complexion remained wanly ashen, and the Xingshun Inji at her brow shimmered faintly, its radiance softened compared to earlier. Su-yi forced himself forward and reached to touch her, but his fingers met only a diaphanous membrane of light protective sheath wrought by Xingshun power that cocooned Lu Ruolai and shielded her from the chaotic stardust. She opened her eyes slowly, and when she saw him, a faint smile curved her lips. "You are awake," she said, her voice clearer than the echoing apparition of before, now imbued with a tangible warmth. She cautioned him not to breach the light membrane, for her Xingshun power remained unstable and might recoil. Su-yi withdrew his hand and glanced at his palm. The silver key had returned to him, its runes no longer merely gold, but threaded with delicate lavender veins, the essence of the Xingshun seal condensed into their pattern and pulsing in time with his heartbeat. He asked in a low tone whether in Yuan Jizhu had truly dissipated, his gaze sweeping the ostensibly tranquil expanse of stardust that nonetheless carried an undercurrent of unease. A jag of pain lanced through Su-yi's meridians, drawing a rough sound from his throat as blood glistened at his lip. Seeing this, Lu Ruolai hastened to help, sending a ribbon of pale gold Xingshun light from her finger to entwine his body. The light threaded into him like a warm river, soothing the rending and guiding the discordant currents toward steadiness. He feared for the cost. She smiled through the pallor and explained that their powers had already been bound through Xingshun resonance. His celestial force now bore the scent of Xingshun. By mending him, she simultaneously fortified her own influence. He fell into a contemplative silence, then lifted his gaze to the growing nebula and asked if they would enter the Xingshun domain once he recovered. She affirmed, but warned that they first must purge the lingering dark matter whose corruption spread within the nearby dust cloud. If it infected the nascent nebula, the consequences would be dire. Relief tempered their exhaustion. Lu Ruolai's figure grew more translucent. Su-yi steadied her and urged a brief respite, but she would not delay. The call of the Xingshun domain swelled, and hesitation might invite further change. With a graceful gesture, she summoned a golden star track from the stardust, a luminous pathway that led straight to the heart of the newly formed nebula. Su-yi felt her fingertips' faint warmth as he took her hand. The once evanescent touch was now undeniably real. They set foot upon the track and watched the stardust coalesce into guiding points beneath them, extending forward with each step. The nebula's core glowed with a gentle, beckoning warmth, as if some distant lantern in the abyss had been lit for them alone. At the terminus of the star trail, the golden core at the heart of the Xinjingyun unfurled like a lotus in bloom, revealing a suspended Xingshun altar. Unlike the sanctum they had seen within a stellar interior before, this reconstructed platform was hewn wholly from pale violet star crystal. 12 Xingzhu circled the altar, each inscribed with distinct Xingshun runes that pulsed with a faint gilded radiance, echoing the Xingshun Yinji upon Lu Ruolai's brow. Lu Ruolai instructed Su Yi to pour his starlight into the Xingxin's Hixin while she guided the Xingxin energy. Only their fusion could awaken the inheritance. Her voice took on a solemn gravity as her own Xingxin power swelled, bathing the altar in a mist of pale gold. Su Yi summoned the starry force within him. Silver light welled from his palm and was slowly poured into the heart crystal. The instant the starlight touched this Hixin, it burst forth in blinding brilliance. A golden pillar of light pierced the Xian Xingyun and illuminated the entirety of the Xingqin Hiang. Knowledge poured into their minds like an unspooling tapestry. The remnant imparted techniques for wielding Xingqin energy, strategies for sealing spatial fissures, and the true vulnerability of the Inyuan Zizu. When at last the luminous shell dissipated, Su Yi opened his eyes to find the pale violet light lingering in his palm, and his channels were forged into newfound resilience. Lu Ruoli's apparition had taken on solidity, her Xingxin Yinji synchronized with Su Yi's palm light, binding them more closely than ever. The remnant raised a hand, and a portal shimmered open before the altar, revealing the black rift beyond. A rolling tide of dark mist swirled within the very breath of the dark matter that fed the Inyuan. The remnant warned them that the portal led directly to the core region of the spatial fissure, where dark matter coagulated most densely, and where the Inyuan core source of the malign growth awaited. Speed was of the essence, for the core absorbed surrounding dark matter and strengthened over time. Hand in hand and blades alight with pale violet force, Su Yi and Lu Ruolai stepped through and were immediately swallowed by the rift's darkness. Within, the dark matter surged like a tidal current, cold and corrosive. Su Yi cleaved a path through the black vapor with his sword, each stroke leaving a trail of scintillant light. Lu Ruolai followed her Xingxin power, manifesting as protective shields that repelled the encroaching void. Far ahead, a crimson mote pulsed, denoting the locus of greatest dark matter density, and as Lu Ruolai warned, the probable position of the Inyuan core. Resolute, they pressed forward. The pale violet radiance that now suffused them formed a ward against the surrounding nothingness, carving a sanctuary through which they advanced. The roar of accumulating dark matter grew louder as they neared the crimson point. The fate of the Xingqin Hiang hinged upon the imminent confrontation within the rift's heart.